A young man, Raito Shirasaki, checked his phone while waiting at a bus stop, wondering when the next bus would arrive. Suddenly, a strange cracking sound echoed, and a fissure began to tear through the very fabric of reality behind him, pulling him into its depths with a terrifying force. He found himself in an ethereal space, staring up at a radiant woman with large wings, who greeted him with a surprising smile. She noted that it had been hundreds of years since a human had last appeared in this realm, and he could only wonder if she was a human or an angel. The winged woman then introduced herself to Raito Shirasaki, explaining that this place was a space existing between dimensions, like a void between stars. He, still disoriented, demanded to know where he was. She calmly informed him that he had been expelled from his home dimension, which was why he now found himself in this interdimensional space, a realm between his world and another. To his shock, she casually added that he could not return to the dimension he had lived in. The angelic being further clarified her role, stating that she managed the cracks between dimensions and was responsible for guiding those who entered this realm, effectively transferring them to another world. Raito, still reeling from the news, interrupted her, urgently asking if there was truly no way back to his original dimension. Her expression remained serene as she delivered the definitive answer. There was no possibility of return. She then advised him to make the best of his new life in the other world, suggesting he view his sudden displacement as an unfortunate accident, much like a major catastrophe. He could only stare in disbelief, utterly overwhelmed by the finality of her words. Overcome with despair, he knelt, his head bowed, lamenting the sudden, irreversible transfer to another world and the inability to say goodbye to anyone he knew. Images of his past life seemed to float around him, just out of reach. Despite his profound sadness, a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He clenched his fist, his gaze hardening as he contemplated a future where returning was no longer an option. He, still grappling with his fate, was asked by the angelic being if he was truly determined. He quickly questioned what kind of world he was being sent to. Responding to his query, the angelic being, with a confident smile, prepared to explain, stating simply that it was a fantasy world. His surprise evident, he repeated the word fantasy. The angelic being then inquired if he enjoyed role-playing games. She continued her explanation, detailing that this world contained real monsters and various races like dwarves and elves. She then added another crucial detail. His body would be reformed upon transfer to that world. The revelation of body reformation shocked him, and he demanded to know what would happen to his form. The angelic being clarified that his memories and soul would remain, but his body would be adapted to the new world. As the implications settled, he felt a sudden wave of faintness, his consciousness wavering as he struggled to comprehend the profound changes awaiting him. Regaining some composure, he asked the angelic being for her name. She, in turn, offered him a way to contact her mentally if he needed information about the new world. With a warm smile, she finally introduced herself as Eris, the one who managed the dimension in between, assuring him that she was normally free and he could call upon her anytime he faced trouble. As her presence faded, Raito was left alone in the void, a profound sense of promise and dread washing over him as he prepared for the unknown. Suddenly, the silence of the void was shattered by a new, angry voice. A bearded man, in a different location, expressed confusion and rage, demanding silence and calling something trash. He then furiously hurled a bundled object, shouting for it to be caught. A young woman with long red hair instinctively reached out, catching the bundle just as a sudden realization struck Raito. His body had shrunk, and he was now an infant. The woman, holding him, cried out in distress, demanding to know what was happening, asserting that this was their child. Still seething, he ordered her to take the accursed child and leave, lamenting that he had placed his hope in someone like her. The woman, tears streaming down her face, simply acknowledged his words, whispering a heartbroken farewell, confessing her deep love for him. As she departed, now seated in a carriage with the infant Raito cradled in her arms, she softly inquired of the driver where they were being taken. The driver, however, regretfully informed her that he was not at liberty to disclose their destination. She continued to weep, lamenting the cruel fate that had befallen them. She spoke of how this child was their son, yet His Highness had declared him to have no requirements to become a king, effectively stating that the child did not exist. Raito, listening to her words, realized with a profound sense of understanding that this woman was indeed his mother. The distraught woman then embraced the crying infant, apologizing for their predicament and reassuring him that everything would be all right, urging him to sleep first, even as her own tears continued to fall. Meanwhile, the infant Raito, now awake, gazed out the carriage window at the passing landscape, observing a large airship in the distance, and wondered what on earth was truly happening around him. His mother noticed he was awake and gently asked if she had disturbed his sleep. She then informed him that they were almost at their new home, a statement that piqued Raito's curiosity. Upon their arrival, the carriage stopped before a huge mansion. An elderly butler, flanked by a line of waiting servants, stepped forward to greet them, welcoming the woman as mistress. Raito, observing the grand estate and the assembled staff, wondered who these people were. The elderly butler then stepped forward, explaining that they were the ones entrusted with the mansion and had pledged to serve her, as commanded by the king. He further explained that there were other children who had received the same treatment as her child, and the king was aware of this. The woman, still holding Raito, pondered if the king had taken a liking to her child, despite his earlier decree. She held the infant Raito close, a sigh escaping her lips as she reassured him that he would not suffer the same oppressive treatment as before. As she continued to hold him, a voice from off-panel informed her that a baby room had already been prepared, inviting her to follow. Inside their new home, she greeted Raito warmly, telling him they could now live peacefully. She kissed his cheek, asking if he liked his new name, Raito, and reminded him to be still for a while. He, in turn, seemed to acknowledge his name, realizing he still possessed it from his previous world. He lay there, a tiny infant, realizing he had safely transferred dimensions, yet many things about his new existence remained unknown to him. He pondered, recalling Eris's words, and concluded that if he had any questions, he could ask her. With that thought, he mentally called out her name, Eris, needing to reach her within his mind. Suddenly, a voice startled him, confirming that he had been safely reincarnated as a human child. Eris greeted him, asking if he could hear her. He was utterly surprised, wondering where the voice was coming from. Eris, amused, reassured him not to worry, explaining that they were in a state of communication where time had stopped, allowing for a long conversation without issue. Still bewildered, he questioned his surroundings, realizing that this strange state was why he couldn't move his body. Eris then clarified that he was in a mansion within the territory, a place where normal humans lived in the kingdom. He continued to process his new reality, a stern, bearded man's image flashing in his mind as Eris's mental voice clarified. He had been born as the child of a royal. Eris further explained that his father, the king, had disliked him, leading to his expulsion from the palace. Thus, he had been born into a complex and challenging environment. Raito, still an infant, reacted with a mental shout, demanding she wait a moment. He questioned what would become of him now. Eris, looking surprised, admitted she didn't know, confessing that she hadn't thoroughly explained everything about this world when they first met. He was stunned by her admission, asking if she was truly serious. Eris confirmed that while she possessed extensive knowledge of this world, she could not foresee his future with her power, especially given his origin from another realm. Accepting this, he remarked that no one truly knows the future. Eris then shifted the topic, inquiring why he could understand the words of this new world. She revealed it was due to a skill called translate. Intrigued, he mentally attempted to utter the word status. Instantly, a game-like command window materialized before him, displaying various details. He wondered aloud what this sudden phenomenon was. Eris clarified that this was magic, a spell known as status, which any human in this world could use to check their own abilities. He acknowledged her explanation as the detailed window displayed his name as Raito Baratoros, his main job as support magician, and his sub-job as alchemist. His status was normal, and a specialized skill called translation skill allowed him to understand all languages and letters. Eris emphasized that there were no bugs in the system. She further explained that because of the translation skill, he would not need to learn how to speak or write in this world. He confirmed his understanding, realizing he could comprehend his mother and other people. Eris affirmed his realization, calling him lucky. His attention then shifted to the jobs section of his status, and he questioned Eris about it. She pondered for a moment, then reminded him that he had been called an accursed child at birth, hinting at a connection to his designated role. Eris confirmed that the reason for his banishment was indeed his job, and then asked if he knew why. Raito, still a baby, gazed at a document, his tiny mind grappling with the concept of his job. Eris confirmed his understanding, stating that his roles were indeed support mage and alchemist. She promised to explain the basics of these jobs step by step. She continued, revealing that Raito lived in the Baratoros kingdom, and his father was King Baratoros XIII. The king had inherited the throne after his brother, the previous ruler, succumbed to sickness. She further elaborated on the kingdom's laws, explaining that only those with royal blood could bear the Baratoros name. After the old queen's death, Raito's father had adopted and raised his brother's 3 daughters. This meant Raito, as the king's true blood heir, was destined to become the representative of the king, not just in name, but in authority. Eris explained that because the kingdom's laws dictated that men were to rule, the king had been overjoyed at Raito's birth, as it ensured the continuation of the royal line. However, she then revealed the core problem, Raito's assigned job. Raito, still a baby, questioned what problem she referred to, wondering if his job was simply too dangerous. Eris hesitated, her expression grave. She then stated bluntly that his job was weak. Raito's eyes widened in shock, his tiny hands clenching. She elaborated on the difficulties, explaining that compared to other professions, the growth and mastery of his skills were incredibly slow. Furthermore, both his jobs lacked any inherent attack capability, making it impossible for him to defeat a monster alone. She concluded that no human had ever truly mastered such a skill. She offered a glimmer of hope, suggesting that his abilities might increase as an adult, and with diligent effort, he could potentially play an active role in combat, even within a party. However, she quickly added a grim caveat. He would gain no experience in such a scenario. Ultimately, she revealed, no one had ever attained the necessary level, and those who failed were simply classified as jobless. A shadowy figure, defeated and alone, illustrated the harsh reality of this fate. Raito, processing this information, questioned the king's decision. He, a royal with the kingdom's blood, had been driven from the palace simply because his job was not good. He found it utterly unreasonable. Eris then countered his indignation, explaining that his job was, in fact, very important in this world. She revealed the brutal truth. People classified as jobless were routinely humiliated, bullied, and not even treated as humans. She posed a chilling question. What would the citizens think if their own king were to become jobless? She continued her explanation, revealing the grim reality of Raito's situation. A rebellion would cause the kingdom to fall, and it was a pity this was the truth. She told Raito he was quite lucky to have only been banished, as normally children like him were killed. Raito, in his infant form, listened with a somber expression. Despite the harsh truths, he resolved not to dwell on the past. He acknowledged that it was good to understand why his father hated him, but he chose to focus on the future instead. Pleased by his resolve, she praised his spirit. He then asked her what he should do now, questioning if he could survive if he didn't start thinking about the future, especially since jobless people were not treated as humans. She confirmed that survival would be impossible without a plan. She revealed she had been waiting for him to say that, emphasizing that in this dangerous world, survival was impossible without power. She then proposed they practice together from now on. He asked if he could truly become strong. She assured him that it was his decision, offering to give him advice and asking him to rely on her. He accepted, expressing his gratitude and stating he would rely on her from now on. As they discussed his future, he suddenly remembered his current infant state and asked about basic needs like food and using the toilet. She, with a cheerful expression, explained that his mother or nanny would take care of such things. This realization caused him to react with extreme shock and dismay, internally screaming in protest at the thought of being unable to handle these tasks himself. He internally protested, stating he was 15 years old, despite looking like a baby, and vehemently declared he did not want to be treated as such. She calmly told him not to worry, reminding him that he was not a normal child. She then informed him he would simply have to endure this situation for about a year. He, on the verge of tears, lamented that he could not let people take care of him going to the toilet. He bit his lip in despair, wishing for death, while she wondered internally when he had become like a female knight caught by orcs, implying his current state of utter humiliation. She bid him farewell, reminding him of his luck in being reincarnated and encouraging him to enjoy his second life. He, still in his infant form, cried out in protest, utterly mortified at the thought of someone changing his diaper. He lay in his crib, startled as the door opened and the woman he knew as his mother entered, announcing her return. She approached him with a warm smile, declaring it was time to feed. A wave of dread washed over him. He understood the implication of feed for an infant. His cries erupted, a desperate, involuntary wail. She held him close, her expression gentle, asking if he was truly so hungry. As he struggled, the humiliating reality of his situation became terrifyingly clear, leaving him to wonder what further indignities awaited him. 2 years had passed since his reincarnation into this world, and young Raito, full of boundless energy, ran through the estate. Exploring its vast interiors had become a daily ritual for him, a task he relished. Behind him, a butler desperately called out, pleading for him to wait. The butler vigorously attempted to restrain Raito, his pleas echoing as he urged the young master not to proceed further. Aaliyah, Raito's elf attendant, now held him firmly, questioning his desire to visit the storage room for books. She reminded him that he couldn't even read yet, but he insisted he could, struggling against her grip. She then scolded him, telling him to stop trying to sneak out of the children's room. Aaliyah apologized, though her tone suggested exasperation as she surveyed the room. It was a complete mess, with toys and various items strewn across the floor, while Raito continued his attempts to escape. She continued to pull him back, sternly reiterating her command for him not to sneak out of the room. Raito, now on his knees, shifted his focus, asking Aaliyah to teach him magic. She responded that it was too early for him to learn and admitted she wasn't proficient with support magic. He persisted, arguing that it would be sufficient if she merely demonstrated it to him. Aaliyah laughed, playfully suggesting she wanted to see a little piglet. Raito pouted in response, and she then firmly told him they needed to clean up seriously. He, however, refused. She explained that her stance was not out of meanness, but because magic was inherently dangerous and should not be used carelessly. Raito, still pouting, simply called her mean. She then asked him what he wanted. He looked up at her, acknowledging her point about magic, but clearly had something more to say. He suddenly appeared behind Aaliyah, startling her with a loud cry. She spun around, shocked to find him there, demanding to know where he had come from. He grinned mischievously, revealing he had been behind her the entire time, questioning her lack of attention. He quickly apologized for tricking her, a slight blush on his face. Aaliyah, still flustered, muttered that it was ridiculous, unable to comprehend how he had managed to sneak up on her despite her vigilance. She closed the door, pondering the strangeness of his actions. Meanwhile, a winged figure named Eris chuckled, remarking that while his acting skills as a child were terrible, he had clearly enjoyed himself. Back in his room, Raito let out a long sigh. He confirmed he had indeed enjoyed the prank, admitting he used the stealth skill, which reduces one's presence to the limit, to make Aaliyah unaware of his existence. He then reflected on his past, recalling how he and his mother, Isla, had been banished from the city due to his crummy class, and how he had somehow managed to become familiar with this new world. He reviewed the skills he had awakened in the past 2 years, including Observant, Endurance, Art of Falling, Dark Vision, and Stealth, noting that skills were essential for survival in this world. He expressed a desire to awaken even more, but lamented his confinement within the estate, surrounded by iron fences, which left him bored. As he gazed through the bars of the fence, a grim realization dawned on him. The estate was a facility designed to lock people away from the start, a veritable prison. He turned to Eris, asking if she thought he could climb over the fence and venture into the forest. Eris, however, firmly advised him against it. She explained that the forest was an exceedingly dangerous place, teeming with countless monsters. Raito gasped in shock, realizing the estate was situated in such a perilous location. Eris confirmed his fears, stating that if the current Raito were to venture into that forest, he would undoubtedly be killed. He had just learned the estate was a prison. Eris, however, reassured him that despite its nature, the estate was the safest place for him, the royalties, and others, protecting them from dangerous hunters and intruders. Since he was confined and bored, Eris suggested they use this time to learn more skills. He mused that he couldn't go into the dangerous forest yet, so learning skills seemed like a good idea. She then explained that while some skills were tied to specific jobs and couldn't be awakened freely, there was no limit to the number of general skills one could awaken. She encouraged him to awaken a lot of skills, and he seemed surprised by the sheer quantity. Eris concluded by stating that they would continue practicing diligently until he obtained sufficient combat power. He enthusiastically agreed, ready to begin his training. 2 years passed, and Raito was now 4 years old. He emerged from a hatch onto the roof of the estate, observing his surroundings. From the rooftop, he gazed out at the vast, dangerous forest that surrounded the estate, wondering when he would finally be able to leave this place. He also recalled the many secret passages hidden within the estate, like one behind a set of drawers. Eris confirmed his thoughts, explaining that the secret passages were indeed escape routes to be used in emergencies. She then asked him about his plans for the day, noting that his skill learning seemed to be progressing well. He proudly announced that he had awakened accuracy and farsight just the day before. He then suggested that since he had awakened so many skills, it might be time to learn magic, even if just a little. Eris, however, firmly rejected the idea, stating it was impossible for his immature, 4-year-old body to handle magic, and that despite his progress, his current skills were still insufficient. She reiterated that for someone with his crummy job, it was crucial to awaken even more skills, as his current training was merely laying the necessary foundations for using magic. She urged him to continue focusing on gaining more skills for the time being. After Eris had once again emphasized the need for foundational skills, Raito sighed, lamenting that magic remained out of his reach. He acknowledged the end of their communication. The cessation of the communication brought with it a sudden, throbbing pain in his head. He realized that maintaining such a continuous connection was proving to be a significant burden. A voice, filled with concern, called out to him. It was Aaliyah, her voice sharp with reprimand, demanding to know why he was in such a dangerous place. Raito, startled, realized his secret excursion had been discovered. His surprise caused him to lose his footing, and he tumbled down a steep incline, crying out as he fell. Aaliyah, close behind, also began to slip. As she plummeted, Aaliyah quickly extended her hand, invoking the spirit of the wind to aid them. A powerful gust of wind erupted, forming a swirling vortex that enveloped both Raito and Aaliyah, slowing their descent. She cried out to him, ensuring his safety. The wind gently deposited them onto the ground. Aaliyah, now relieved, offered a reassuring smile, telling him that everything was all right. Her relief, however, was quickly followed by a light smack to his head, a clear sign of her lingering frustration. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued to scold him, emphasizing the grave danger he had put himself in. She reminded him that if anything had happened, both she and his mother would have been heartbroken. Raito, chastened, offered a sincere apology. He complained that his feet were numb from the fall, and Aaliyah helped him to his feet, reiterating the need for him to be more careful. As they recovered, Raito's attention was drawn to a nearby flower, and he innocently asked Aaliyah for its name. He found himself amidst a vibrant garden, where Aaliyah explained that the plants were not mere flowers but herbs, crucial ingredients for brewing health potions. She clarified that cultivating them required specific knowledge and the cultivation skill. He then inquired if she possessed such an ability. Aaliyah confirmed that she managed these very gardens and, as an elf, possessed extensive knowledge of plants. Hearing this, he eagerly asked her to teach him about cultivation. She responded that she was amenable to teaching him, but cautioned him against mentioning magic in return, reminding him that such tasks were part of a servant's duties. Despite her warning, he continued to plead for her instruction. Moments later, he proudly displayed his newly acquired cultivating herbs skill, confident in its future usefulness. Aaliyah, taken aback by his rapid acquisition, expressed her surprise. Seated at a grand table laden with celebratory dishes, he beamed as the servants clapped, expressing his gratitude to everyone present. As the celebration continued, he received gifts from the butler and other staff members, thanking each of them. He reflected on the warmth of their blessings, despite the world's perception of him as a cursed child. Aaliyah then stepped forward, presenting her own gift and wishing her young master a happy birthday. He felt a deep sense of thankfulness for her gesture. He inquired about the contents of her gift, and she revealed it was a health potion, proudly stating it had been brewed using the very herbs he had cultivated. He thanked Aaliyah, a realization dawning on him that this potion was a tangible result of his own efforts. Just then, Eris approached, holding a small, intricately designed box, and asked him to accept her gift. Raito's mother, Isla, presented him with a small, ornate box, explaining that while she had originally intended to give it to him when he was older, circumstances now allowed her to entrust it to him. Raito looked up at her, questioning her words. She clarified that it was not yet time to look inside, stating she would keep the key until he came of age. She instructed him to hold on to and treasure the box until then. Raito agreed, noting the unusual atmosphere surrounding the gift. He pondered the mysterious gift, realizing he could ask Eris about its contents. But the thought of waiting 10 years until he was 17, the age considered adult in this world, weighed heavily on him. His mother's hand gently placed the box aside, indicating it would be put away for the time being. Sometime later, Raito was diligently tending to a large herb garden, having cultivated a significant amount. Aaliyah approached him, smiling, and asked if it wasn't time for him to rest. As they shared tea, Raito expressed his desire to cultivate even more varieties of herbs. Aaliyah praised his impressive dedication, noting he cared for the herbs daily without boredom. He explained that cultivating herbs was simply fun, prompting her to offer a reward for his hard work. She then asked if he would like her to teach him an elven game, mentioning she had played it often as a child. Raito looked intrigued, asking about the nature of these elven games. A hand, presumably Aaliyah's, drew a simple triangle on the ground, marking the boundaries for the game, stating that the rules were simple. She explained the rules. Raito must continuously stand inside the triangle without stepping out, and if he succeeded, he would win. She warned him that she would throw obstacles at him, but reassured him that she would not physically touch him. She then revealed her intention to use magic, her hand glowing with energy, to create these obstacles. With a sudden gust of wind, Raito was caught off guard, exclaiming as he was pushed back by the magical force. He tumbled to the ground once more, defeated. Aaliyah, smiling brightly, leaned in to ask how he found the elven game, declaring that the young master had lost again. He protested vehemently, questioning what she was talking about and accusing her of using magic she hadn't shown him before. She simply patted his head, calling him immature and stating there was nothing he could do against her abilities. Yet, despite his complaints, he quickly bounced back, eagerly asking Aaliyah to play one more time. She looked surprised, remarking that she was fine either way. He gazed upwards, a new thought forming in his mind. Perhaps this game could serve as a special form of training. And so, the game continued, with him repeatedly falling as he cried out for one more time. He continued to pant, exhausted, yet still pleaded with Aaliyah for just one more round. She apologized for blowing him away so suddenly at first, while the butler, observing from a distance, wondered if this would truly be the final time. Aaliyah then unleashed another powerful gust of wind. This time, he braced himself, realizing that after the initial blast, he could slowly ward off the wind. He gritted his teeth, struggling against the persistent force. Aaliyah, noticing his resilience, remarked on his stubbornness and decided to intensify her efforts. In that moment of intense struggle, a new combat skill, circular block, was learned. Empowered by his new ability, he let out a determined cry, pushing forward against the magical wind. He unleashed a powerful strike, deflecting the incoming wind with a focused impact, a clear demonstration of his newly awakened circular block skill. He beamed with pride, exclaiming his success in warding off the wind. Aaliyah, caught off guard, stumbled back with a surprised cry as the wind dissipated around her, wondering what had just happened. As Aaliyah recovered, he explained that he was trying to awaken the circular block skill. She questioned if it was indeed a skill awakened by a fighter, asking if his actions were strange. She then declared his feat to be very strange, her voice rising in disbelief as she wondered aloud how the young master, who held a scrummy job, could awaken such skills. Immediately regretting her harsh words, Aaliyah gasped in horror at her own outburst. She quickly embraced Raito, profusely apologizing to him, lamenting why she had said such a thing. His eyes, wide with a mixture of surprise and hurt, stared blankly ahead as Aaliyah held him close. Aaliyah continued her tearful apologies, while he, though still held, internally acknowledged that she hadn't meant anything truly malicious. He further realized that changing his position was difficult, and that Aaliyah hadn't looked down on him. Yet, despite this understanding, the sting of her words lingered, and Aaliyah continued to whisper her apologies. Later, lying in bed, Raito reflected on Eris, recalling that Aaliyah, in the end, treated him well. He understood that her cruelty was understandable, given that he was the current king's only son, and if he were to lose his current position, the lives of those around him would no longer be guaranteed. He then recalled Eris's comforting words, her promise that no matter what happened, she would always be his ally, urging him not to worry. He lay in a deep slumber, his face serene in repose, perhaps finding a brief respite from the weight of his recent thoughts. A young boy, Raito, sat amidst a collection of everyday objects, his gaze fixed on a small spoon he held. He possessed an insatiable curiosity, always seeking to uncover new possibilities and open new doors. Moments later, Aaliyah stood over him, her expression one of exasperation. She declared his technique utterly bizarre, especially for a supposedly jobless rich boy. Raito, however, merely let out a quiet sigh, seemingly accustomed to her remarks. He remained seated, his posture slumped, a deep melancholy clouding his features. He admitted that whenever he was reminded of his current standing, he felt profoundly depressed. Yet, even in his gloom, his thoughts drifted to Eris, and he found himself contemplating something else entirely. Aaliyah then suggested they move on to the next step in his training. Raito, his earlier sadness replaced by a determined smile, affirmed his resolve to grow stronger as quickly as possible. His eyes widened with excitement as he eagerly questioned if the next step involved magic. Eris, now present, gently corrected him, explaining that magic was still beyond his grasp. Instead, she proposed they begin learning the skills directly associated with his inherent abilities or job. Raito listened, a look of surprise on his face. She then revealed the first skill, material transformation, the ability to change one type of metal into another. Raito, his mind already racing, internally identified this as alchemy. The instruction continued, detailing material strengthening, which allowed for the enhancement of an object's durability and hardness, and shape alteration, granting the power to freely change an object's form. Eris, holding up 3 fingers, emphatically declared that Raito needed to master these 3 fundamental spells. She offered a reassuring smile, telling Raito not to worry and that he could easily learn the 3 skills by the end of the day. Raito, surprised, questioned if it was truly possible to master them so quickly. He then found himself alone, realizing he couldn't practice alchemy in front of everyone else. Fortunately, he had kept some metal cutlery in his room, providing him with the necessary materials. He declared his intention to begin with material transformation, though a lingering thought about not being able to look Aaliyah in the eye crossed his mind. He concentrated intently, holding a knife, focusing his will to make it strong and sharp, like a diamond. With a swift motion, he thrust the transformed knife forward, piercing a nearby teddy bear with ease. He gasped in amazement, realizing the knife had gone straight through the toy. It was an incredible success. He then realized he had accidentally used the shape alteration skill as well. System messages confirmed he had learned both material transformation and shape alteration. Surprised by how easily he had acquired these abilities, he decided to revert the knife to its normal state for now. He held a fork, his next target for practice, intending to make it super hard using material strengthening. With a determined expression, he brought the strengthened fork down against the transformed knife, ready to test its durability. The 2 pieces of cutlery met with a resounding clang, a testament to the power of his alchemy. He observed the results of his recent alchemy. The knife, made of the same material as the fork, was completely worn down, yet the fork, which he had subjected to material strengthening, remained perfectly intact. A system notification confirmed his successful acquisition of the material strengthening skill. He reacted with surprise, realizing that even without properly calling her name, his intent had reached Aaliyah. He mused that they had communicated like this so many times that he had simply grown accustomed to it. From off-panel, Aaliyah's voice chided him for calling her Ai-chan. Eris, now present, watched Raito with a sly smile, remarking that he seemed to have stumbled upon the secret of this world. Raito, still at the table with the utensils, found job-based skills really easy to learn, dismissing her claim about a secret of the world as an exaggeration. He pondered why this skill was so looked down upon, stating that he honestly could not imagine this power being as useless as people claim. Eris explained that while alchemy-based skills were indeed extraordinary, their power was only temporary. She illustrated this with a pocket watch, clarifying that after a certain amount of time passed, any item that had been changed would revert to its original form. Raito reacted with shock, exclaiming that a 1-minute limit was so short. Eris confirmed that in his case, the upper limit would indeed be about 1 minute. She then added that in this world, steel was the hardest known metal to man. He suddenly understood, exclaiming, "Oh, right." He recalled his previous world, where countless materials stronger than steel existed. He realized that as someone with knowledge from another world, he could easily make metals stronger than steel, concluding that his skill was indeed valuable. Eris, however, clarified that in this world, magical metals were mainstream, and they were much stronger and sturdier than steel. She added that, in fact, most weapons were made of these magical metals. Raito looked dismayed. Eris further explained that alchemy was a magic-based job, so alchemists typically had low physical skills. She illustrated this with a small, struggling alchemist trying to lift a large sword, stating that even if Raito could create a powerful sword, he would not be able to use it. Raito then pondered how combining shape alteration and material strengthening might overcome these limitations. He was asked to open his status window, and Eris explained that from this point forward, proficiency would become incredibly important. He questioned the meaning of proficiency. As he examined his alchemist unique skills, he noticed new text had appeared. Eris clarified that proficiency was a numerical representation of how much a skill had been used, akin to levels, and that using a skill more would increase its proficiency. She added that higher proficiency levels would reduce the physical toll on his body, and personally recommended he start by raising the level of shape alteration. He was surprised to learn that with sufficient proficiency in shape alteration, he would be able to use the skill on objects other than metals, such as trees, dirt, and even cups. He then realized his material transformation skill had already reached its maximum level. Though his material transformation skill was already at its maximum level, he expressed a slight dissatisfaction, wondering why it had happened so quickly. Eris explained that it was likely due to his otherworldly knowledge. Eris then suggested a specific method for practicing shape alteration, advising him to keep the concept of a metronome from his world in mind. Eager to begin, he declared his readiness to start training immediately. She elaborated, instructing him to imagine a metronome and try moving his knife left to right in a similar, rhythmic motion. He recognized the object she described, confirming it was the one from the music room. Eris assured him that once he mastered this basic movement, he should strive to move the knife faster and with greater precision, confident that the practice would prove invaluable. Determined, he sat down and began his practice, imagining a metronome and diligently moving his knife from left to right, ready to tackle the challenge. Despite his efforts, the knife remained stiff and straight, causing him to question if he was imagining the metronome correctly and why the material wouldn't yield. He quickly realized the problem. The knife was still made of steel, which was too rigid. He decided to change its material to aluminum, knowing it would be softer and easier to bend. With a successful transformation, the aluminum knife squished and curved into a new shape, and he considered continuing to imagine the metronome for further practice. He stared in wide-eyed surprise as the knife he was attempting to manipulate suddenly shattered into countless pieces. The sudden destruction left him pondering how he could possibly use shape alteration on such fragmented pieces, and more importantly, how he would explain the broken item. Despite his initial doubts, he focused his will, and the scattered fragments began to wriggle and coalesce, responding to his command of shape alteration. He continued to concentrate, envisioning the knife's original form as he willed the pieces to draw closer and reassemble. With intense focus, the fragments seamlessly merged, reforming the knife perfectly. A new understanding solidified within him. He had learned the special skill, correction. Reflecting on his newfound correction skill, he realized its immense potential. With it, he could break objects without fear of discovery, allowing him to practice his alchemy skills freely within his room. Later, while deep in thought outside, he heard a familiar voice. Aaliyah, carrying a basket, approached him with a worried expression, questioning if he should already be outdoors. Hearing her concern, he quickly reassured her that he was perfectly fine. However, as she hurried towards him, Aaliyah suddenly slipped, sending her basket and its contents scattering across the ground. Reacting instantly, Raito swiftly used shape alteration to dig a soft depression in the ground beneath Aaliyah, cushioning her fall and preventing a harsh impact. He knew he couldn't reveal his quick use of alchemy to her. Meanwhile, back inside the mansion, Raito's mother, Isla, discovered a collection of his toys, all strangely warped and misshapen from his secret practice. She cried out his name in distress. She peered through the window, her expression etched with worry as she spoke to Aaliyah, remarking that Raito, the young master, seemed to carry a heavy burden on his soul. Aaliyah, meanwhile, urged her to come closer. Unbeknownst to them, Raito was already making his escape, carefully climbing out of a window, much to Aaliyah's wide-eyed astonishment. Having made his way to another part of the house, he held a simple fork, intently examining a door lock. With a mischievous grin, he declared that locks meant nothing to him, a master of the shape alteration skill, as the fork in his hand twisted and warped into the precise form of a key. He then revealed the true purpose of his excitement, proclaiming hypervibration as he held the knife. Recalling how he had stumbled upon this skill while meticulously practicing his precision with shape alteration, realizing it allowed him to achieve such feats. With his new skill in mind, he walked purposefully towards a sturdy wooden chair, deciding it would serve as an adequate test subject, explaining that he had come specifically to try out his newfound ability. He then swung the knife with a determined cry of "T," aiming a swift, precise strike at the chair. His eyes widened in surprise as he realized the impact was far less than intended. He had only lightly grazed the surface of the chair. A moment of confusion washed over him, but then his gaze fell upon the chair, which now lay completely dismantled, its pieces scattered across the floor, revealing the true, devastating power of his seemingly light touch. He cried out in surprise as the knife, still vibrating intensely, spun wildly in the air, a testament to the uncontrolled power he had just unleashed. The vibrating knife then sliced through the floorboards with alarming ease, leaving a deep gouge. He stared, wide-eyed and horrified, at the damage, realizing the immense destructive potential of his new skill. Considering the unexpected power, he mused that while shape alteration was undeniably useful, this new ability, hypervibration, would likely prove even more effective in combat. He imagined its applications, a faint smile touching his lips. His thoughts then drifted to a storage room he had never been allowed to enter due to its locked door. He noted that Aaliyah was not currently present, leaving him an opportunity to explore. With a determined expression, he approached the door, confident that his shape alteration skill could bypass any lock. A soft click echoed as the mechanism yielded to his touch. Stepping inside, he surveyed the small space, his eyes widening slightly. He had expected a trove of hidden items, but instead, the room appeared largely empty, save for a single, imposing bookshelf. He wondered what secrets it held. His gaze fell upon a single black book, which he picked up, pondering its contents. He realized the room was less a storage area and more akin to a large closet, with only one bookshelf dominating the space. He wondered what else might be hidden within. He turned his attention to the bookshelf, its shelves stretching high. The interior of the room, particularly the depths of the shelves, was shrouded in an impenetrable, pitch-black darkness, hinting at unknown contents. Raito, a young boy, stands before a tall bookshelf, observing the rows of identical, pitch-black books. He wonders aloud what they are, noting that they appear to be a register containing the names of various royals and ministers. He flips through one, finding it difficult to decipher the contents. He continues reading, his eyes widening in shock as he discovers a chilling entry. Cause of death, assassination by stabbing. A sudden realization dawns on him as he notices that all the books are identical, each detailing names and their causes of death with meticulous precision. He questions if the assassin himself might have authored these grim records. He speculates that these very books might be the reason Aaliyah and the other household employees are strictly forbidden from entering this room. His gaze then falls upon another entry, and he gasps, a look of profound shock spreading across his face. He then discovers his own name, along with his mother's, meticulously recorded within the pages. However, he notes with a mix of confusion and dread that, unlike the others, no cause of death is listed for either of them. He wonders if someone is playing a cruel joke on him. He then realizes that many other pages also lack a listed cause of death, leading him to a chilling deduction. Perhaps those whose names are recorded without a cause of death are individuals who have not yet caused any trouble, implying that the books serve as a premonition or a ledger of future targets. A shiver runs down his spine as the full weight of this implication settles upon him. He quickly closes the ominous book, his face etched with fear and confusion. With a trembling hand, he reaches up and pulls the cabinet door shut, attempting to conceal the disturbing truth he has just uncovered. The cabinet door clicked shut, leaving him alone in the quiet room, his wide eyes still reflecting the shock of his discovery. As he stood there, a voice from outside the room broke the silence, asking if he had finally uncovered the secret. The distinct sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hallway, drawing closer to the room. He sat on the bed, clutching a pillow, his mind racing with the implications of the books he had found. He realized they were not just any records, but compiled reports detailing the assassinations of important figures within the kingdom. A chilling question echoed in his thoughts. Why were such dangerous secrets hidden within this very mansion? Eris, now by his side, confirmed his grim assessment. She explained that the mansion's extreme isolation from the outside world made it the perfect place to conceal the kingdom's darkest secrets. Furthermore, she added, the surrounding area was infested with demon beasts, ensuring that even if someone discovered the register, they would find no safe escape. Raito, still processing the revelations, wondered aloud how they had managed to live in such an isolated place all this time, and from where their daily necessities originated. Eris calmly revealed that all supplies were transported via a teleportation magic circle, carefully hidden in the mansion's basement. His surprise grew when she mentioned the existence of a basement, and then further still when she casually added that an airship had been used to bring him to the mansion in the first place. She continued, emphasizing the mansion's impregnable nature. If anyone wished to breach its defenses or escape its confines, their only viable path would be through the sky. Considering this new piece of information, Raito, still clutching his pillow, resolved to begin practicing how to fly. Sometime later, Eris watched in astonishment as Raito demonstrated a unique technique with a small knife, which she identified as a hyper-vibration phenomenon. Raito, beaming with excitement, declared it fascinating, noting that no one in this world would have conceived of such an application. His excitement quickly turned to shock when Eris suggested he learn swordsmanship to further develop his unique idea. He protested, reminding her that his designated path was that of a magician. Despite his initial protest, Raito admitted he had always harbored a slight desire for swordsmanship. Eris smiled gently, encouraging him to challenge himself and try it, assuring him that even if it took time to master, he would ultimately succeed. He agreed to give it a try. 6 months passed, and Raito, now 6 years old, could be heard practicing diligently. The sounds of his efforts, a series of energetic shouts, and the swift whoosh of a blade, echoed through the air. As Raito continued his vigorous practice with a wooden sword, Aaliyah appeared, observing him. She remarked, with a hint of disapproval, that his loud yell seemed rather undignified for a young master. Startled, Raito paused, asking if it was already time for breakfast. Aaliyah confirmed it was. Then a sudden realization seemed to dawn upon her. She found him drenched in sweat, questioning how long he had been training so early in the morning. Aaliyah insisted he clean up before breakfast, but Raito, still focused on his practice, felt a need to combine his training methods. Moments later, Raito unleashed a powerful strike, shouting Helm Splitter as his wooden sword cleaved through a thick training post with a resounding snap. As he finished cleaning up, Aaliyah observed him, remarking that he was a truly peculiar child. He flinched from the cold water, exclaiming at its chill, while Aaliyah continued to ponder his unusual path, stating she had never seen anyone capable of learning swordsmanship while also being a magician. Raito then thanked her for the wooden sword, noting internally that their relationship, which had been awkward for a time, had thankfully returned to normal. Encouraged, he asked if she would teach him swordsmanship, but she firmly refused, reiterating her stance that she would not. With his cleaning complete, Aaliyah suggested they proceed to the dining room. Raito grumbled in mild annoyance but complied, pulling on his tunic. As they walked, she admonished him to stop muttering like a berserker, though he continued to complain of thirst and a desire to fight. Later, after a satisfying meal, Raito felt completely full, concluding that eating well after strenuous exercise was truly the best. Suddenly, a thought struck him. He needed to ask Eris something. As he pondered this, he inadvertently caused Aaliyah to blurt out a strange name. Aimen. Her eyes widened in shock and embarrassment, demanding to know what he had just made her say. Eris, with a confident smirk, acknowledged Raito's diligent swordsmanship training. She then revealed her extensive knowledge of his past world, including its popular media, explaining that as a Dimension Dragon's manager, such understanding was expected. Raito, taken aback, expressed surprise that she knew about anime. He admitted, however, that he had reached an impasse in his swordsmanship, unable to learn any new skills beyond the Helm Splitter technique. Observing his dejection, Eris mused that improving his swordsmanship further without an opponent would be challenging. She then suggested he try learning an entirely new skill until he could find a suitable sparring partner. She then smiled knowingly as Raito's face lit up with excitement, declaring that her suggestion was exactly what he had in mind. He eagerly asked what kind of skill he should learn next. With a close-up, she then proposed the long-awaited magic lesson he had desired. His eyes widened in utter shock and overwhelming excitement at the mention of magic. Despite her initial hesitation, admitting it might be a bit too early, Raito was overcome with joy, loudly demanding that she hurry up and teach him magic immediately. He continued his outburst, throwing a full-blown tantrum and threatening not to speak to her anymore if she refused to teach him magic, repeatedly shouting his refusal to accept any other answer. Eris observed his behavior, noting he was turning back into a toddler. His tantrum was abruptly halted when Eris reminded him of the logical consequence. If he refused to speak to her, she wouldn't be able to teach him any magic at all. Moments later, she reappeared, having changed into a witch's hat and holding a wand and a magic book, announcing the start of Miss Eris' special magic lesson. Raito, bewildered, questioned if his eyes were deceiving him or if she truly looked different. Eris, with a slight blush, confessed she simply wanted to spice things up. She began to explain the support magician class, clarifying that its primary role was to assist allies with supportive magic. This class, she added, came with 3 distinct unique skills. Raito listened, acknowledging her words. These 3 skills, she demonstrated with simple illustrations, were recovery strengthening, magical strengthening, and physical strengthening. Raito, eager to understand more, then posed a question, asking her to elaborate on the specific effects of each of these 3 unique skills. She praised his excellent question, ready to delve deeper. She started with physical strengthening, illustrating its effect with a depiction of a muscular figure. This magic, she explained, allowed one to increase their physical ability, with the skill's effectiveness growing significantly with higher proficiency. Continuing her explanation, she revealed that at maximum proficiency, one's physical ability could be buffed up to 5 times its normal state. However, she cautioned, pushing one's body too far could lead to collapse once the magic's effect wore off. Raito gasped in amazement, then looked concerned at the potential drawback. She elaborated that, much like the first skill, increasing proficiency and reaching max levels would boost offensive power to 5 times its normal strength. However, she quickly added, the mana consumption would also be 5 times higher than normal. Raito's eyes widened in shock at the immense cost. And lastly, she introduced recovery strengthening, illustrating it with a figure tending to a wounded ally. This skill, she explained, was designed to increase a human's natural regenerative power. Raito pondered, asking if this last skill had no real demerits. She confirmed that while it didn't heal as quickly as normal healing magic, its primary drawback was a relatively slow recovery rate. However, she then declared with a bright smile that she was far from finished, promising to reveal the absolute best thing about being a support magician. With a flourish, she announced the ultimate advantage. Support magicians possess top-class mana capacity, surpassing all other classes that had ever existed. She smiled, acknowledging Raito's excitement about the high mana capacity, but then tempered his enthusiasm by stating that was where the good news ended. Raito, still captivated, exclaimed how cool it sounded, wondering if it truly meant they were a top-class profession. She then clarified, suggesting he might understand better if she put it in gaming terms. She asked him to imagine a class with an immense mana pool, yet one that possessed no inherent usefulness. Eris continued, stating she would now reveal the support magician's greatest drawback. Raito initially thought it might not be so bad, but his expression quickly shifted to shock as she confirmed there was more to explain. She revealed that a support magician could never learn the powerful magic cannon spell. Raito, unfamiliar with the term, questioned what a magic cannon was. She demonstrated, explaining that it was a spell allowing one to project mana as a beam, which some people referred to as a mana bullet. He pondered, comparing it to a laser beam, and she confirmed his understanding. She emphasized the immense power of the magic cannon, stating that even an apprentice magician could use it to obliterate approximately 10 goblins simultaneously. However, she quickly added that despite its power, the spell required a significant amount of mana and could not be cast in rapid succession. Raito, absorbing this information, then asked if this meant a support magician like himself was entirely incapable of learning any offensive magic. She clarified that she hadn't stated that explicitly, but there was a caveat. She explained that support magicians were limited to learning only beginner-level magic, which was comparable to what other classes could learn. Raito, disheartened, remarked that this did not sound strong at all. She conceded that while such magic could still be used in battle, it was largely ineffective, noting that people didn't refer to it as lifestyle magic without reason. She continued, explaining that support magicians were inherently difficult to utilize because they were largely restricted to supportive magic, unable to cast powerful offensive spells like magic cannon. This meant their offensive capabilities were limited to beginner-level magic, leaving them with virtually no means to attack. However, she then posed a question, asking what if there was a way to mitigate one of the significant drawbacks of supportive magic, which was the immense burden it placed on the caster's body. Raito's eyes widened in sudden realization, a spark of understanding igniting within him. He exclaimed that it must be about strengthening recovery, and she confirmed his insight, stating that if one used magic to boost their natural recovery abilities, they could reduce the burden on their body. She elaborated that while it didn't change the fundamental nature of support magicians, it depended entirely on how one chose to utilize their abilities. Raito mused that supportive magic seemed quite useful after all. Eris added that since magicians in this world were expected to have a bigger offensive power than a swordsman or warrior, it was not a completely useless class. She assured him that he would be able to reduce the burden on his body as much as he desired. Raito, filled with renewed determination, declared that he would definitely master the power of the support magician. Despite the perception that he was jobless, young Raito's days were anything but idle. From rigorous training lessons to playful escapes from his attendant Aaliyah, his life was a constant flurry of activity, hinting at a burgeoning magical aptitude. One such lesson began with Aaliyah, laden with a stack of books, announcing it was time to practice alphabets. Raito, now 7 years old, looked unimpressed, asserting that he already knew how to write and possessed translation skills, making such basic lessons seem unnecessary. She continued, explaining that after the alphabets, they would delve into the differences among the world's 6 races. Raito, however, expressed an eagerness to learn about support magic instead. Aaliyah, firm in her role, admonished him, stating that merely writing better than her did not grant him permission to slack off. Aaliyah then began the lesson, detailing that 6 distinct races inhabited their world. She started with humans, who constituted the majority of the population and were considered one of the most intelligent among the 6. Continuing her explanation, she described the elves as possessing the longest lifespans and the most potent magic. Following them were the beasts, characterized by traits of both humans and animals. Next, Aaliyah spoke of the giants, renowned for their massive physiques and formidable strength. She then introduced the demons, whose appearance and abilities varied greatly, yet whose intelligence matched that of humans. Finally, she concluded the overview with the dwarfs, a naturally boisterous race known for producing countless skilled blacksmiths capable of crafting specialized equipment, including holy swords and demon blades. Aaliyah was utterly astonished, exclaiming that Raito had seemingly memorized the entire book. He, looking slightly abashed, confessed that he had only recounted what he had heard from Eris, then innocently questioned if he had done something wrong. Still surprised but now beaming with pride, Aaliyah expressed her delight at his eagerness to learn. She then proposed they continue their lesson by delving into the history of the kingdom, a suggestion that left Raito looking utterly shocked. He sighed, flipping a page of the book. At this rate, he wondered, when would he ever find time for his own training? How truly tedious. The history lesson continued, detailing that the Baltros kingdom, a human kingdom renowned for its vast territory, had been founded approximately 300 years prior. Beyond humans, only the beastmen, giants, and elves had successfully established their own nations. The narrative then shifted to a tumultuous period, explaining that the 6 races had once been embroiled in a harsh, widespread war. However, King Baltros, Raito's great-grandfather, had managed to forge alliances with the other races. Through these alliances, the war was brought to a definitive end, establishing a new era of peace. Aaliyah, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, then revealed that the blood of such a great person, King Baltros, now flowed within Raito. He reacted with genuine surprise, admitting he had never heard this astonishing fact before. She gasped, realizing her oversight, and began to apologize profusely. However, he quickly interjected, reassuring her that he did not mind at all. Despite his reassurance, Aaliyah bowed deeply, offering her sincerest apologies to her young master. Changing the subject, he then inquired if she could use beginner magic. Aaliyah, taken aback, asked if he was referring to lifestyle magic. She pondered for a moment, confirming that she could indeed use lifestyle magic, and believed it would not be an issue for him to learn. He, in turn, eagerly asked her to demonstrate it. Aaliyah agreed, noting that such magic posed no danger. Raito's face lit up with excitement, clearly thrilled by the prospect. Then, with a knowing smile, Aaliyah proposed they begin with a simple lesson about magic itself. Raito's eyes widened in shock, exclaiming in disbelief at the mention of yet another lesson. The world's magic was classified into 7 distinct elements: fire, water, earth, wind, thunder, holy, and darkness. This fundamental understanding was crucial for young Master Raito as his lessons began. Aaliyah continued, explaining that elemental aptitude was largely determined by one's race and profession. For instance, humans were typically better attuned to fire magic, while elves, like herself, were more proficient with wind magic. She clarified that while one could increase their proficiency in beginner magic through training, it was generally not considered powerful enough for offensive use, and the overall power of one's magic also depended on their inherent aptitude and elemental compatibility. Despite her detailed explanation, he appeared somewhat bored, his head wobbling as he struggled to absorb the theoretical knowledge. Aaliyah, noticing his disinterest, asked if he was following along. Then, with a bright smile, she proposed moving past the theory to demonstrate the magic in action. His eyes lit up with anticipation, wondering if the magic she was about to show would be as powerful as the magic that had saved him before. To begin, Aaliyah announced she would demonstrate the beginner wind magic that elves were most skilled at. However, she quickly tempered his expectations, urging him not to anticipate anything grand from beginner magic. With a focused expression, she extended her hand, concentrating her will. A surge of energy manifested as she declared, "Wind pressure," and a faint gust of air swirled from her palm. A gentle breeze, barely more than a whisper, emanated from her, ruffling Raito's hair slightly. He looked utterly bewildered by the meager result, questioning if that was truly all there was to it. Aaliyah, with a slight pout, reminded him that she had warned him not to. Undeterred by the underwhelming display, he eagerly inquired if he could also use that magic. Aaliyah, realizing they had never actually checked his elemental affinity, decided a simple test was in order, even if it wouldn't be much. He, having just learned about spellcasting, extended his hand and chanted, "Wind pressure." A notification confirmed that the battle. She questioned the intensity of the magic, stating that it shouldn't be possible for a beginner spell, even with aptitude, to be so powerful. Raito, still reeling, pointed out that the force was comparable to Eris's own magic. Eris, shocked, demanded to know the true nature of the magic. With a graceful motion, she conjured a fire orb, a small sphere of flickering flames, which Raito observed with wide-eyed wonder. She then demonstrated her control, moving the fire orbs around her with ease, much to Raito's amazement. Raito, captivated by the display, eagerly announced that it was his turn to try casting the fire orb spell. He successfully manifested a large fire orb, exclaiming his triumph with wide eyes. His mother, Isla, watched in astonishment, questioning if he could truly use such powerful magic. His mother, Isla, observed him struggling to move the orb, pondering how he could generate such a large fire orb on his very first attempt. She found herself at a loss for words, only able to offer a hesitant affirmation. He managed to make it move slightly, a small wiggle of the fiery mass, and joyfully thanked his mother for her time and guidance. She then encouraged him to always do his best in his studies, to which he readily agreed. As he departed, Isla's gaze lingered on him, her expression turning sorrowful. She mused on his extraordinary aptitude for magic, lamenting that if he hadn't been born a support magician, he might have been allowed to become the next king. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Later, he practiced alone, manifesting multiple fire orbs. He realized that 4 orbs were his current limit, but understood that this number would likely increase with greater proficiency. He also returned to Aaliyah, learning 2 more spells, Earth Elemental and Water Elemental Ice Lump. After his mother had shown him the fire orb spell, he resolved to train diligently, acknowledging that while he wanted to experiment with everything, he seemed to have a better aptitude for fire orb than ice lump. He concluded that this must be what was meant by elemental aptitude. He then began to practice movement, using the magic Aaliyah had employed to save him as a reference. With a focused expression, he unleashed a powerful burst of wind pressure, propelling himself forward. He celebrated his success, floating effortlessly through the air. He then considered the need for greater caution, imagining his mother and Aaliyah's potential shock if they were to witness his new abilities. He pondered the possibility of fusing 2 beginner magic spells, provided they were compatible. He recalled Aaliyah's earlier explanation that elements possess their own compatibilities, noting that fire and wind magic were considered a good match. His grin widened as he realized that if his theory proved correct, he could finally possess a super powerful magic of his own creation. To test his theory, he began by conjuring several fire orbs, which floated in the air before him. Then, he focused, intending to infuse wind pressure into the fiery orbs. However, as he attempted the infusion, the magic reacted violently, creating a powerful downward force and a swirling vortex of wind and fire around him, leaving him utterly surprised. Instead of a simple infusion, the combined magic coalesced into a sharp, piercing projectile that shot forward from his outstretched hand with immense force. The projectile then streaked across the sky with incredible speed, leaving a trail of energy and creating a booming sound as it vanished into the distance. He stared, wide-eyed and astonished, wondering what exactly he had just created. A moment later, a system notification appeared, confirming that he had learned the battle skill, Blazing Spear, described as a fusion magic between wind magic and fire magic. Reflecting on this new skill, he realized it could become much more powerful with additional training, and questioned if it could still be considered beginner magic. He understood that he had created a fusion magic by combining 2 different elements, and that such a spell could seriously injure someone. He collapsed to the ground, his head throbbing intensely as the residual energy from his newly formed Blazing Spear coursed through him. His attendant, Aaliyah, rushed to his side, her voice filled with alarm as she called out to her young master. Moments later, he blinked awake in his bed, a dull ache lingering in his head. He groaned, still feeling the lingering effects of the mana depletion, and wondered aloud what had truly happened to him. Eris, now by his side, calmly explained that he had simply used too much mana. His curiosity to learn magic had completely backfired, she noted, but quickly added that she should first congratulate him for discovering fusion magic on his own. She advised him that as long as he trained hard to increase his proficiency, he would surely obtain something significant in the future. He, however, mused that it would be incredibly tough to practice with his current, limited mana pool. Eris acknowledged his concern, stating that while he could increase his mana pool by leveling up through defeating demonic beasts, she knew a much faster and easier way to do it. She then hinted at a mysterious thing that could help him. She then revealed the solution, declaring that she was talking about the skill point he possessed. He looked surprised, questioning what a skill point was. She clarified that skill points could be used to acquire brand new skills or increase existing skill proficiency, but warned him that they would never regenerate once used, a crucial detail to bear in mind. Eris then proposed that they use his skill point immediately to learn a new skill, believing the most beneficial one for him right now was the unique skill, Recovery Strengthening. He inquired if he simply needed to acquire the skill. Eris confirmed, explaining that with Recovery Strengthening, even if he were to deplete all the mana in his body at once, the strain on his physical form would be minimal. He expressed his astonishment, asking why such a convenient system had never been revealed to him before. Eris added that it was a unique skill, meaning that once he learned it, he would reap its benefits forever. He groaned, still feeling the lingering effects of his mana exhaustion. Eris, ever the pragmatist, explained that while there might be an easy way to acquire skills, humans often wouldn't put in the necessary hard work if they knew such shortcuts existed. Moments later, he stirred in his bed, realizing his head no longer ached as intensely. Eris, observing his recovery, announced her departure, eager to resume her sweet tea time. As he lay there, Rido's thoughts turned to his demanding schedule. He mused that between his support magic training and fusion magic practice, he had so many things to do and so little time. His immediate concern, however, was devising a plan to get Aaliyah off his tail, allowing him more freedom to train. Swords clashed repeatedly, the metallic ring echoing as 2 figures engaged in a fierce practice bout. The intense training continued, with the young master clashing blades against Aaliyah in front of a grand estate. It had been 8 years since his reincarnation, and 6 months prior, Aaliyah had revealed her true swordsman job, taking it upon herself to properly teach him swordsmanship from that day forward. He gritted his teeth, attempting a powerful strike, calling out a helm splitter as he brought his blade down with all his might. But she moved with incredible speed, a blur of motion as she deftly evaded his attack. As she moved, she sharply admonished him, warning him not to rely so heavily on his battle skills alone. With a swift, decisive move, she brought her blade to a halt just inches from his neck, declaring this her 387th win out of 387 bouts. He could only grunt in frustration, defeated once more. She then explained that his body moved in a predictable formation when he used a battle skill, leaving him with big openings that his opponent could easily exploit. He sighed, slumped on the ground in defeat. Despite his repeated losses, she acknowledged his significant improvement in swordsmanship, suggesting he might now be as strong as a novice adventurer. He looked up, intrigued by the mention of adventurer. She clarified that she was referring to the people associated with the Adventurers Guild, describing them as jacks of all trades known for doing anything for money, from subjugating monsters and bodyguard duty to collecting herbs and even helping with chores. He expressed surprise at her extensive knowledge of adventurers. She smiled brightly, admitting that she too had once been an adventurer in her youth, a revelation that clearly surprised her young charge. The young master, still processing her words, asked if she was truly an adventurer. She confirmed her past as a C-rank adventurer, explaining that she had retired from that life to become an attendant. He then leaned in, whispering to inquire if adventurers earned a significant amount of money. She acknowledged that they did, before elaborating on the adventurer ranking system, which ranged from S rank as the highest to F rank as the lowest. She added that S rank adventurers were exceedingly rare in the entire world. Her expression suddenly turned stern as she delivered a grim warning. Weak adventurers typically did not survive long. The young master listened, his face etched with concern. Just as quickly, she broke into a giggle, revealing her serious tone had been a jest, much to the young master's wide-eyed astonishment. Later, in his room, the young master practiced his swordsmanship, reflecting on the idea of becoming an adventurer. He mused that it would be beneficial to freely develop his abilities, especially since he had learned over 50 skills in the past 8 years, with more than 20 acquired in the current year alone. He felt confident that the variety of skills he could now use had dramatically increased. He recalled Eris's words about how much easier it would be to learn skills once he grasped the underlying concept. Yet, he found himself bewildered by how he had managed to learn the disassembling skills simply by observing in the kitchen. His curiosity, however, had led to trouble. He was now being sternly reprimanded by the head chef and a kitchen assistant, who emphatically forbade him from entering the kitchen. He grumbled internally, wishing he had acquired more practical skills like cooking instead. Back in his room, his stomach rumbled loudly. He complained about the uselessness of the disassembling skill if he couldn't even use it to cook, and wondered what food might still be available in the dining room. The dining room, however, stood empty and devoid of any prepared meals. Still grappling with hunger after his kitchen ban, he found some apples, a small victory. As he ate, a thought surfaced. Eris had once mentioned a teleportation magic circle in their basement. He wondered where the stairs he was now seeing might lead. Following the stairs down, he discovered a heavily locked door, secured with chains and a large padlock. The sight made him wonder if this was the location Eris had spoken of. Standing before the formidable barrier, he realized this was a room he had never seen before, situated directly beneath the dining room. He called out for Eris, who promptly responded to his summons. She confirmed his suspicion, identifying the hidden chamber as the armory. Her explanation was chillingly simple. While it was indeed called an armory, the items stored within were not typical weapons, but rather poisons and tools specifically designed for assassination. He gasped, utterly stunned by the revelation. She continued, detailing that these instruments were used to erase members of the royal family who were deemed worthless, ensuring their swift and silent removal without any difficulty. He interrupted, questioning the grim term erase. Seeing his confusion, she decided that since events had progressed this far, it was time to reveal everything to him, addressing him by his true name, Raito. She then delivered another shocking truth. An assassin lived among the servants within the very mansion they inhabited. Raito stared, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. Eris continued, explaining that when the kingdom finally deemed his existence more trouble than it was worth, an order would be sent to her to kill him on the spot. Raito's face contorted in a silent scream of terror. He vehemently denied her words, protesting that she must be lying. He pointed out that there was only one female among the mansion's servants, and a dreadful realization dawned on him as he asked if she meant her. His mind raced to Aaliyah, the only one who fit the description. He listened in stunned silence as Aaliyah, his trusted companion, revealed her true vocations, not merely a swordsman, but a spirit magician and an assassin. She confirmed this grim truth with a resolute gaze. Raito, still reeling from the revelation, protested, reminding her that she was supposed to be his mother's attendant. Aaliyah calmly explained that this role was merely a pretense, designed to make him lower his guard around her. He vehemently denied her words, but she confirmed her allegiance, stating that she was also a member of Black Shadow, an assassin organization that served directly under the throne, a shadowy group of cloaked figures appearing behind her. Raito demanded to know why she would ever become his enemy, his voice filled with disbelief. Aaliyah, her eyes closed in a somber expression, offered a quiet apology, admitting that she feared she might indeed become his adversary in the future. His eyes widened in shock as Aaliyah continued, revealing the king's first wife, the queen, would give birth to a boy in 2 years. This event, she explained, would unfortunately cause Raito to lose his right as the sole successor to the crown. A chilling realization dawned upon Raito as Aaliyah's voice echoed in his mind, explaining that when that time came, the king would surely order her to make him disappear from this world, a stark image of his younger self standing alone in the darkness, casting a long shadow. Later, alone in his room, Raito clutched his head, tears welling in his eyes. He struggled to reconcile the image of Aaliyah as an assassin, yet he knew there was no reason for her to have lied to him. He tried to calm himself, reasoning that she wouldn't kill him immediately, but the grim reality set in. He would be powerless, merely counting down the days until his inevitable death. He desperately wondered what he was supposed to do now. Raito's thoughts raced, considering the barrier stone and decayed rock he had seen in the hidden armory, realizing they might be his only hope. However, he quickly understood that escaping the mansion was likely impossible, as its defenses were deeply buried. He worried about his mother's safety if he tried to flee, lamenting his cruel fate and the miracle that he had lived peacefully for so long. A fierce resolve hardened his gaze. He would not let them kill him like this. He urged himself to use his brain, reminding himself that there was still time to act. He stood beneath the full moon, his hands glowing as he activated his shape alteration skill, conjuring a small, flickering orb of fire. With the orb still hovering, he reflected on his progress, realizing he could now manipulate the iron fence with his skill. He had also diligently trained, acquiring enough new abilities to contend with demonic beasts. His gaze then shifted beyond the fence, into the dark expanse of the forest. He resolved to explore it that very night, intending to meticulously plan his escape route. Having made his decision, the fiery orb in his hand vanished with a soft fwish. He muttered to himself, "Good." And now, to navigate the darkness, he activated Night Vision, a skill that granted him clear sight even on the blackest nights. Next, he employed Stealth to conceal his presence and silent steps to muffle his footfalls, ensuring his movement through the forest would go undetected. With his preparations complete, he executed a powerful leap, propelling himself high into the air. As he ascended, he mused about acquiring the Search Presence skill in the future, but for now, his immediate goal was escape. He landed softly with a thud, his momentum carrying him swiftly through the dense undergrowth of the forest. Suddenly, he lost his footing, stumbling with a surprised "W-O." As he regained his balance, a thought struck him. It was ironic that the very leap skill he had learned to escape Aaliyah's pursuit was now being used to navigate the forest for his escape route. Just as he was about to fall, he quickly conjured an ice lump beneath his feet, using it as a temporary platform to push off and regain his footing. Landing safely, he let out a relieved "Phew." That was really close. He had barely ventured into the forest when a grotesque creature with sharp teeth and a crude club emerged from the undergrowth. "Is that a goblin?" He wondered aloud, his eyes wide with surprise. The sight of the creature, a demonic beast, sparked a realization within him. This was an opportunity for real combat experience, and the perfect moment to test a new weapon. He resolved to create a weapon specifically for himself, utilizing his unique shape alteration skill in conjunction with Ice Lump. With a focused expression, he channeled his abilities, manifesting a shimmering blade of ice. "Glacial sword," he declared, gripping the newly formed weapon. He moved swiftly, leaping towards the unsuspecting goblin. And while it still hasn't noticed me, Helm Splitter, he thought, executing a powerful downward strike. The glacial sword sliced through the air with deadly precision, connecting with the creature. A sickening thud echoed through the quiet forest as the goblin fell, defeated. He felt a surge of adrenaline, his face contorted in a grimace of effort and slight disgust. Panting from the exertion, he stood over the fallen foe, a new understanding dawning on him. So that was a demonic beast, he mused, still catching his breath. To think that this kind of creature really exists in this world. He examined his hand, a lingering, unpleasant sensation still present from the impact. Crap, the unpleasant feeling is still lingering on my hands, he thought, but then reassured himself. But thankfully, it doesn't prevent me from swinging my weapon or anything. As he adjusted his grip on the glacial sword, a faint rustling sound caught his attention, causing his eyes to widen in alarm. From the dense undergrowth, 3 more goblins emerged, their crude weapons and menacing grins signaling a new, more formidable threat. He stared in disbelief as 3 more goblins emerged from the dense foliage, their guttural cries echoing through the forest. The immediate threat had multiplied. One of the creatures lunged, its crude weapon whistling through the air, but he swiftly dodged the attack, his eyes scanning the surrounding enemies. As the goblins pressed in, he recalled Eris's urgent warning. He must run away as fast as possible when encountering any danger. He wondered if he could truly escape this predicament without a fight. She had also instructed him to call her immediately if things got out of hand. Yet, a deeper question gnawed at him. If he couldn't even defeat mere goblins, how could he ever hope to escape the wretched mansion and his predetermined fate? With a renewed surge of determination, he gripped his glacial sword tighter. He would survive, cutting through the unfair destiny with his own hands. The young master, Raito, found himself in a dire situation, facing 2 menacing goblins. He gripped his sword tightly, a grim determination settling over him as he realized he needed to fight for his very survival. Without hesitation, he executed a swift leap, vaulting over one of the surprised goblins. Mid-air, he brought his blade down in a powerful slash. Instead of striking, he suddenly released his grip, throwing the sword with surprising force. The weapon spun through the air, striking one of the goblins squarely in the head with a sickening impact, causing it to collapse. As the goblin fell, he watched, reflecting that this precise throwing technique was a skill he had honed with Aaliyah. The surviving goblin, enraged by the loss of its companion, shrieked and lunged at him with its crude club. Meeting the charge head-on, he activated a skill, physical strength strengthening, and delivered a powerful punch that sent the goblin reeling. He crouched low, facing the snarling goblin, ready for the next move. The creature let out a guttural growl, its eyes fixed on him. With a surge of power, he unleashed a barrage of magic, calling forth both wind pressure and fire orbs to overwhelm his foe. The magical energies converged, forming a potent, blazing spear that he thrust forward, striking the goblin with immense force. He gritted his teeth, the effort evident on his face. He stood panting, his chest heaving, as the defeated goblin fizzled into nothingness. A wave of relief washed over him. He had truly done it. Sitting down to recover, he realized he had leveled up from the battle and gained several skill points. He pondered what new abilities he might now possess. A new skill manifested before him: storage magic. The system explained it allowed him to store objects in a different space, with a weight limit of 50 kilograms, though it could not hold liquids, gases, or living beings. He wondered how this new ability would function. To test the new magic, he decided to try storing a simple pebble. As he focused, a small, glowing icon appeared, confirming the item had been successfully stored. He then learned how to retrieve items, extending his hand to summon a list of his stored possessions. The system even provided a brief description of the pebble he had just placed there. "Interesting," he exclaimed, finding the storage magic incredibly useful. Eris's voice then reached him, asking if his first battle had gone smoothly. He confirmed it had, admitting the experience had boosted his confidence in combat. He let out a sigh, deciding that was enough training for one day, and resolved to continue his practice the following night. Aaliyah's voice reminded him that he still had 2 full years before he could leave the mansion, urging him to continue striving for greater strength. Eris watched him as he yawned, clearly exhausted, making his way back towards the mansion. As night fell, the grand mansion stood silently amidst the surrounding trees, its windows dark. He, Raito, continued his training, now pursuing a swift horned rabbit through the forest. He acknowledged the creature's cuteness, but declared his intention to capture it. Raito lunged with his sword, attempting to strike, but the nimble rabbit deftly evaded his attack, causing him to stumble awkwardly. The young master crashed into the undergrowth with a cry, the impact jarring him. As he recovered from the fall, a new technical skill, Flash Step, was suddenly learned, much to his surprise. Later, Raito efficiently used his disassembling skill on the horned rabbit, noting that its horns were valuable ingredients for nourishment medicine. He offered a quiet thanks to the creature. He then decided to cook the rabbit, acknowledging the inherent danger of starting a fire in the forest, but determined to risk it for a skill he wished to acquire. He retrieved his cooking tools from storage. Raito eagerly devoured the cooked rabbit, exclaiming how incredibly delicious it was, just as he had heard adventurers praise its taste. A sudden realization dawned on him. He had completely forgotten about his goal to acquire the cooking skill and had simply eaten the meal normally. With a sigh, he resolved to try again later. Looking at the remaining cooked meat, he suddenly found himself face to face with a massive, wolf-like creature that lunged with terrifying speed, its jaws snapping shut with a powerful smash. As the creature snarled, he realized with a jolt that it was not alone. Several more of the menacing, wolf-like beings, which he identified as kobolds, emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing ominously. He cursed his own carelessness, realizing that starting a fire had been a grave mistake, drawing these dangerous creatures to his location. Knowing that kobolds generally possessed higher levels than goblins, he understood that escape was his best option. He swiftly conjured and launched his fire orbs at the approaching beasts. The fire orbs struck, creating a momentary opening, and he seized the chance, dashing forward with renewed determination. He leaped into the fray, but the kobolds merely roared, seemingly unaffected by his magic. He wondered if his fire orbs had lacked sufficient power, prompting him to manifest a glacial sword. He swung the glacial sword, striking one of the kobolds, but to his shock, the blade crunched against its teeth, failing to inflict any significant damage. His eyes widened in disbelief as his glacial sword shattered, leaving him vulnerable before the snarling kobolds. He narrowly dodged a swift swipe from one of the beasts, the sharp claws missing him by mere inches. As the situation grew increasingly dire, he braced himself, realizing he had no choice but to unleash his blazing lance. He unleashed a blast of wind pressure, pushing back the encroaching kobolds. He realized his usual fire orbs were unavailable, and he hadn't been given the chance to use any fusion magic. He lamented that he needed to keep his distance and pack a bigger punch. In that moment of desperation, he suddenly remembered a skill he possessed, magical strength enhancing. A realization dawned on him. With this new insight, he channeled his power, declaring he would finish them. He believed this much firepower would be enough to defeat them. Before he could fully unleash his attack, a swift kobold struck him with immense force, sending him skidding across the ground with a cry of pain. Stunned by the unexpected blow, he looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. He realized his attack had not eliminated all of the creatures. As he struggled to regain his footing, more kobolds emerged from the shadows, surrounding him completely. He felt trapped, realizing he was in a checkmate position. The young master found himself surrounded by a pack of snarling kobolds, their eyes gleaming with malice. Holding a small, flickering fire orb, he declared his intent to bet everything on this moment. A desperate resolve etched upon his face. With a determined expression, he then unleashed a powerful burst of magic, shouting the incantation for wind pressure as a swirling force erupted from his outstretched hand. The force of the attack manifested as a massive, swirling vortex of wind, tearing through the air with incredible speed and power. He strained, pushing the powerful gust forward, his body tensing with the effort as the magical energy continued to surge from him. The swirling wind engulfed the demonic beasts, their forms obscured by the tempest as they roared in pain and fury, unable to withstand the magical onslaught. As the dust settled from the powerful attack, a system notification appeared, announcing that the technical skill Blazing Bullet had been learned. He looked at the notification with a mix of surprise and understanding, acknowledging the acquisition of the new skill. Later, sitting amidst the defeated foes, he mused on the incredible power of beginner magic when boosted by magical strengthening, the remnants of the battle still smoking around him. The next day, concern lingered in the air as Aaliyah spoke with the butler, expressing her worry about the young master's strange behavior from the previous day. The butler informed her that he was currently resting in his room, feeling unwell, and Aaliyah suggested they simply let him rest for the day. Aaliyah and the butler's concerns were far from the young master's mind as he continued his magical training. With a focused expression, he unleashed a powerful gust of wind, declaring it a wind blade. He observed the results with satisfaction, realizing that the wind pressure magic had evolved into wind blade when boosted with magical strengthening. This discovery filled him with excitement, knowing he now possessed more ways to attack. Considering the potential of magical strengthening, he pondered what other beginner magic might evolve. He noted that only Earth Lump remained on his list, wondering if it could transform into something capable of creating a large hole in the ground. With a determined look, he knelt and extended his hands towards the earth, preparing to test the limits of Earth Lump. To his surprise, as he pressed his palms down, his hands sank into the ground with an unexpected softness, as if the earth itself had yielded. He quickly realized the magic was not about creating a lump, but rather reinforcing the gravity around his palms. A new understanding dawned on him, making him reconsider his approach. If that was truly the case, he mused, it would be unwise to go in with full force. He decided to try a lighter application of the newfound ability. He then turned his attention to a nearby tree, winding up and delivering a powerful punch with a resounding shout. The impact produced a distinct zwap sound, and he looked on with wide-eyed surprise at the result of his strike. A system notification appeared, announcing that Fist Strike had been learned. He stared in disbelief, wondering if he had acquired this new technical skill from that very punch. He stood before a massive tree, contemplating his next training step. He decided it was time to test the reinforced version of Earth Lump with his full strength. With a determined shout, he unleashed a powerful punch, activating the Fist Strike skill, which impacted the tree with a resounding BM. The force of his own blow sent him hurtling backward, landing with a heavy thud. As he recovered, a new realization dawned upon him. He had acquired yet another skill. Heavy Smash had been learned, and he resolved to train this new ability as well. He charged forward once more, combining Fist Strike with his newly learned Heavy Smash, delivering a devastating blow that visibly cracked the sturdy tree. He continued his relentless assault, each strike a powerful thump that further splintered the wood, pushing his limits. Pausing to observe the damage, he muttered to himself, realizing his technique needed to be more refined, more focused. He wound up for another strike, his eyes narrowed in concentration, wondering if this next attempt would yield the desired result. With a fierce shout, he unleashed a concentrated punch, driving his fist deep into the tree with immense force. The impact was catastrophic. The tree trunk exploded outward, shattering into countless fragments with a deafening crash. He continued his rigorous training, pushing his body to its limits. Suddenly, a notification appeared, confirming he had learned the technical skill Cannon Smash. He reacted with an excited exclamation. As he processed this new skill, a throbbing sensation spread through his body, indicating the activation of recovery strengthening. He exclaimed about the pain, yet smiled, realizing he had gained another skill. He wobbled, feeling the lingering effects of his intense training and the new skill. He mused aloud, wondering if this was what muscle aches felt like, surprised that his body could sustain such damage. He then sighed in relief. He paused, a thought striking him. He questioned his role, wondering if he wasn't supposed to be a support magician. He then resolved that if he truly wanted to master martial art type skills, he must continue to train even more. Several days later, the young master was called to continue his training, the voice echoing across the estate grounds. He ran, responding to the call, acknowledging that he knew what he needed to do. Aaliyah, standing nearby, urged him to pick up his pace, reminding him he still had 30 more laps to complete. He pushed himself, reflecting on how much his life had changed, especially since acquiring his new skills. Exhausted, he pleaded with Aaliyah, begging her to listen. She sighed, explaining that her insistence on his training was for his own good. He then realized that the biggest change was Aaliyah finally agreeing to train him in martial arts. Aaliyah firmly told him that his primary role was that of a magician, asserting there was no real reason for him to force himself to learn martial-type battle skills. She emphasized that no matter how hard he tried to emulate martial art-type jobs, he would never reach their level. He attempted to interject, but she continued. He sighed, conceding that he understood her point. He then asked if it wasn't better to train his body to avoid getting sick often in the future. Aaliyah paused, acknowledging that he wasn't wrong, but still seemed hesitant. He thanked her profusely. He lay on the ground, panting heavily, as Aaliyah outlined his new regimen. She explained that first, he would run 100 laps around the mansion every single day to train his lower body. He acknowledged her instruction, but internally, he found the sheer difficulty of it hard to believe. Continuing her instructions with a cheerful smile, Aaliyah added that they would also train his muscles. She then directed him to wear weights around his arms and legs constantly from that point forward. Aaliyah then emphasized the importance of practical training. He, now visibly burdened by the heavy weights, struggled but affirmed his commitment to the task. Still struggling with the weights, he enthusiastically declared his readiness for the challenge, but then paused to question Aaliyah about her own duties. Clenching her fist with a determined smile, she announced that they would spar every day after his lessons. Aaliyah clarified her role, stating that her main occupation was to aid the young master in any way she could, her smile unwavering. Thus began his grueling daily routine. He was seen sparring intensely with Aaliyah, then eating a meal with a worried expression, and finally, collapsing from sheer exhaustion while still wearing the heavy weights. As Aaliyah looked on, seemingly exasperated by his persistent effort. During one such sparring session, Aaliyah delivered a swift, powerful punch, while he attempted to counter with a forceful blow of his own, shouting with effort. However, Aaliyah proved too strong, landing a decisive kick directly into his chest that sent him reeling backward with a resounding impact. He lay on the ground, gasping for air, utterly defeated. Aaliyah stood over him, declaring the training session concluded for the day. Still struggling to breathe, he acknowledged her words. Lying there, drenched in sweat and utterly spent, he reflected that despite the grueling nature of the training, these days had been truly fun for him. The young master, still engaged in his rigorous training, listened as Aaliyah cheerfully reminded him of their next session. She encouraged him to look forward to it, promising more challenges. As they walked back towards the mansion, he expressed his gratitude to Aaliyah. Despite the demanding regimen, he found himself thinking that the path they walked together was somehow not long enough, hinting at his growing enjoyment of the training. 6 months had passed since the training began, and he now lay reflecting on his progress. He had acquired 2 new technical skills, evasion and Herculean strength. He continued to ponder the relentless march of time, realizing that the day which would profoundly alter his life was drawing ever closer. 10 years had now elapsed since his reincarnation, and his hand rested upon a book, a silent testament to the knowledge he had accumulated. The narrative confirmed that the pivotal day, destined to reshape his existence, was indeed approaching rapidly. The sounds of hurried footsteps echoed through the mansion as a voice urgently inquired if all the ingredients for the feast had arrived, simultaneously instructing servants to bring more decorations for the place. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, the butler and a young lady meticulously reviewed plans. The young lady suggested adding different colored flowers around a specific area, while the butler expressed his hope that the young master would be truly pleased with this year's present. Elsewhere, the young master, Rido, sat diligently at a desk, penning a document. He mused that it was his 10th birthday tomorrow, and his writing was finally complete. He then called out to Eris, asking if his written work was sufficient. She reviewed it, confirming that it should pose no problems. After numerous discussions with Eris, Rido had decided that to escape the mansion, he would need to fake his own death. He sat amidst his packed belongings, preparing for the drastic measure. He further elaborated on his plan, explaining that he would use shape alteration to recreate his bone structure from monster bones, place it inside the incinerator behind the mansion, and then set it ablaze. He also intended to leave behind a last will, finding it ironic that he had to write his own will just to stay alive. Eris affirmed his understanding, reminding him that his father had already decided to erase him. Rido, looking at his packed items, realized with a grim expression that they were truly going through with the escape tonight. She then added that while it might seem sudden, leaving the mansion today was for the best, as an order to kill him would surely be issued tomorrow, on his very birthday. She reassured Rido, promising to guide him to a safe place during his escape that very night. He acknowledged her words, still looking thoughtful. Moments later, Rido found himself looking at a small, ornate box, realizing he should return the item inside. The box was one his mother had given him, with strict instructions never to open it before he came of age. He wondered what secrets it held. Despite the warning, a curiosity sparked within him, and he decided a quick peek wouldn't hurt. With a soft click, he activated his shape alteration skill, and the intricate lock yielded. The lid sprang open, revealing a dazzling, multifaceted crystal resting on a plush cushion. Rido gasped, utterly surprised by its brilliance. Eris, observing the discovery, identified it as a holy light stone, explaining it was likely given to Rido's mother, Isla, as her dowry when she married King Baltros, a stone only members of the Baltros kingdom's royal family were permitted to possess. In a memory, his mother, Isla, had once held the same box, her expression gentle as she conveyed that even though she was exiled, she still wanted him to have it as undeniable proof of his royal blood. Young Rido, in that same memory, had looked up at her, overwhelmed that his mother would entrust him with such a priceless item. Back in the present, Rido gently placed the opened box down, a quiet, "Thank you," and "I'm sorry," escaping his lips, a silent message to his mother. He then picked up a small potion, his gaze distant as he recalled Aaliyah's words, a troubling question forming in his mind. Was Aaliyah truly going to kill him as part of their plan? He wrestled with his thoughts, realizing that his decision to escape without seeing her one last time was precisely to avoid hesitation. He sternly told himself to stop dwelling on such sentiments. Considering his predicament, he mused that it would likely be acceptable to use stealth for a final walk around the mansion, acknowledging that this was his last day within its walls. With that resolve, he moved quietly through the grand, sunlit hallways of the mansion, his footsteps barely audible. His clandestine exploration led him to the bustling kitchen, where he observed the chef and a kitchen assistant diligently preparing the day's meals. He then found himself gazing out a window, his eyes sweeping across the distant, majestic mountains under a vast, open sky. As he continued his stealthy journey, he paused to peek through a slightly ajar door, spotting Aaliyah in conversation with the butler, a document held in her hands. He watched them, a faint smile gracing his lips, while Aaliyah, still clutching the document, met his gaze with a gentle, knowing smile of her own. Moments later, he walked away from the door, a look of sudden surprise and realization dawning on his face. He then noticed another door, that of the storage room, standing inexplicably ajar, and wondered if Aaliyah might be inside. Peeking inside, he saw Aaliyah, her eyes wide with a chilling intensity, as she confirmed an order to kill the target and declared her intention to execute the mission. She stood, her expression shifting from a thoughtful gaze to a chilling, knowing smile, then settling into a determined focus. The sight sent a profound shudder through Raito, who could only stare in disbelief. Who is that? He wondered, a horrifying realization dawning on him. Is that really Aaliyah? He instinctively clapped a hand over his mouth, his eyes wide with terror, struggling to suppress any sound that might betray his presence. Suddenly, he heard a distinct flutter nearby, followed by a sharp bam as something struck the wall. The sounds jolted him from his frozen state, and he cursed under his breath, realizing he had to move. He burst into action, scrambling towards a window, his voice urgent as he called out for Eris, a desperate plea escaping his lips. As he called out, Eris appeared, her expression filled with regret. She apologized, admitting she had been overly optimistic and couldn't clearly foresee Raito's future. She revealed that they had made their move unexpectedly early, before his birthday, which was not good. Raito, overwhelmed, cut her off, demanding to know where he should go now. She continued, explaining that Aaliyah shouldn't know they were aware of her secret, as she would surely figure it out the moment she entered his room. Eris then emphatically instructed him to get out of the place as fast as he could. He acknowledged her warning, a grim determination settling on his face. He immediately began to act on her advice, activating his physical strengthening skill, preparing his body for the arduous escape. With another burst of speed, he executed a flash step, propelling himself forward with incredible momentum, a blur of motion across the ground. He then executed a powerful leap, soaring over the imposing mansion gate, landing on the other side. He paused, panting heavily, the exertion evident in his ragged breaths, but a sense of urgency still drove him. Once clear of the grounds, he activated his observant and far-sight skills, turning his gaze back towards the mansion. His eyes, now enhanced, focused on a distant window, where he could clearly discern Aaliyah, standing calmly within. He observed Aaliyah, who appeared genuinely concerned, and a flicker of hope ignited within him, making him believe she truly cared for his well-being. However, the illusion shattered as Aaliyah's true, cold expression emerged, her eyes wide and unsettling, as she clutched a knife with a menacing grip. A profound shudder ran through him, a gasp escaping his lips as the horrifying reality set in. He quickly activated his skills, taking a swift step and then dashing away with all his might, fleeing the mansion. As he ran desperately through the dense forest, calling out Aaliyah's name in a desperate plea, a stark contrast appeared in his mind, a memory of Aaliyah smiling warmly, offering him a slice of cake. His face contorted in anguish. He could only utter a single, heartbroken question. Why? He recalled a series of cherished moments, Aaliyah playfully teasing him, gently offering him a flower, and presenting him with a thoughtful gift, all memories of a happy, shared past. Tears streamed down his face as the weight of the betrayal crushed him, forcing out a pained cry. Why must it be like this? He continued to run, his voice raw with emotion, demanding answers from the one who had shattered his world. Tell me, Aaliyah. He had desperately wanted to believe in her until the very end, to stay together forever as they had before. But now, Raito's cries of regret only reverberated off the empty sky, unanswered and alone. Having fled his home, the young man found himself alone, deep within the dark forest, seeking refuge from an unknown pursuit. He pondered if Eris was actively hunting him, but quickly dismissed the thought, realizing that his sudden disappearance must have already caused a significant commotion, and they would know he had entered the forest. As he sat, he reflected on his current predicament, recalling Aria's words that he could run if chased while in the forest. He wondered what his next course of action should be from this point forward. He acknowledged the situation, understanding that it would take him several days to traverse the forest. With night approaching, he decided it was time to search for suitable shelter. Suddenly, a thought struck him, and he remembered a small bottle of medicine he possessed. He considered that if he used the ground medicine, it would significantly lower the chance of encountering monsters. Noticing the sky darkening, he realized rain was imminent and knew he needed to act quickly. Moments later, the rain began to fall heavily. He quickly decided to find immediate cover and activated his shape change skill to adapt to the sudden downpour. His alchemy skills proved incredibly useful, allowing him to effortlessly create a small cave, providing instant shelter from the relentless rain. From the safety of his newly formed sanctuary, he peered out, observing the heavy rain continuing to lash against the forest. He suddenly found himself face to face with a massive white wolf, its imposing presence filling the small cave. He stared, wide-eyed, wondering if this powerful creature was a new threat. The wolf, however, did not seem hostile. Instead, it began to nuzzle him, emitting soft, rumbling sounds. He reacted with surprise, a small yuwa escaping his lips as the large creature pressed against him. It let out a gentle bark, its eyes closed in apparent contentment, while he, still startled, looked on with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Soon, his apprehension faded, replaced by a genuine smile as the wolf licked his face. He embraced the creature, realizing it was incredibly friendly and not scary at all. As he continued to bond with the friendly wolf, Eris appeared, observing the scene. She remarked that it was a great white wolf, then asked him what they should do, calling out his name. The wolf then seemed to share a memory or a vision, revealing its past. It had been living alone since its parents, the former lord of the forest, were killed by monsters. He pondered the wolf's unusual friendliness, questioning if it was truly devoid of hostility, especially given that most living things in this forest were hostile unless they had no reason to be. The wolf responded, indicating that it was not cautious because he himself harbored no hostility. Eris then explained that the wolf's parents were lost, and it seemed the child had been raised by elves. She added that even weak monsters would band together to survive in such a harsh environment. He looked at the wolf, understanding that even in a forest teeming with monsters, the elves had done their best to raise it. He then wondered if the elves' house was still there, or if they had moved, noting that they had been so close but had disappeared from the forest. He suggested they go look for the elves' dwelling, believing it would be better than their current spot. He speculated that rather than a house, it might be a remodeled cave. The wolf, seemingly in agreement, looked on. He continued his journey through the forest, the gentle rain falling around him, a white wolf at his side. As he glanced back, he noticed not just the white wolf, but several others following closely behind, confirming that his companion was indeed leading them. After some time, he arrived at a magnificent waterfall, its roar filling the air, and declared that they had reached their destination. The white wolf turned its head, looking first at the cascading water, then at him, who seemed momentarily taken aback by the sight. Investigating further, he cautiously peered behind the powerful curtain of water, realizing there was a hidden entrance concealed within the rock face. Stepping through the watery veil, he and the white wolf found themselves inside a spacious, cave-like dwelling, a simple lantern hanging from the arched ceiling, illuminating the rough-hewn interior. The dwelling contained rudimentary furnishings, a sturdy wooden bed, a desk, and shelves, all carved or built into the natural rock, suggesting a functional, if Spartan, existence. He looked up at the lantern, still lit, as the white wolf barked, confirming his suspicion that elves had indeed lived there. He echoed the sentiment, acknowledging the undeniable evidence of past inhabitants. Sitting on a wooden bench, he observed that the dwelling was remarkably free of dust, and the lamp was still lit, leading him to conclude that its former residents must have departed not long ago. The white wolf barked again, nudging a bowl with its nose. As he considered the dwelling's potential, he decided it would serve well as a base, expressing his approval of the discovery. He knelt beside the majestic white wolf, asking if it was hungry, and then inquired if a nearby indentation in the ground was its food bowl. With a cheerful grin, he then presented something to the wolf, declaring he had found something great. He offered the wolf a piece of dried meat, which the creature regarded with a curious, almost surprised expression. As the wolf seemed to sense a shared solitude, thinking the young man was alone just like him, the protagonist's mind drifted, recalling a beloved dog from his previous life. He looked down, a somber expression on his face, acknowledging the profound loneliness that came with being by oneself. A wave of emotion washed over him, causing him to cover his face as he realized he truly could not return to his past, a past that included the smiling heiress and a maid in a grand setting. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at the white wolf, pleading with it to stay with him, while the wolf gazed back intently. The wolf responded with a decisive bark, and the young man's face lit up with a joyful smile, declaring their companionship decided before embracing the creature warmly. He decided to bestow upon the white wolf the same name as his cherished dog from his past life, a small, dark-furred companion he remembered fondly. With a triumphant cry, he announced the wolf's new name, "You are you." The white wolf responded with a soft bark, seemingly acknowledging its new identity. He looked up, his expression shifting to one of surprise as the light of day broke through what appeared to be a cave opening or a break in the storm clouds. A new companionship was about to begin. Moments later, he beamed, realizing the rain had finally stopped. Turning to his white wolf companion, he suggested they seize the opportunity to find some breakfast. The wolf responded with an eager bark, and he, with a determined smile, declared that he would be counting on his new friend from that moment forward. The wolf barked once more, as if in agreement, as the door to an unseen world beyond the stars began to open for their new life. Chapter 11 opens with a vibrant illustration depicting a young man, cloaked and holding a glowing orb, standing beside a majestic white wolf. A blonde woman in a maid-like outfit stands nearby, smiling gently. The young man, now seen in a more relaxed setting, gently brushes the thick fur of the white wolf, who rests contentedly beside him. He reflects that living a life for two in the forest is not so bad. Suddenly, the tranquility of the forest shatters as a massive wild boar charges through the undergrowth, its tusks gleaming. The white wolf, alert and fierce, barks a warning, ready to defend. From a hidden vantage point, the young man observes the unfolding confrontation, his gaze sharp and focused on the approaching danger. The white wolf lunges, sinking its teeth into the boar's neck, eliciting a pained squeal from the beast as the struggle intensifies. As the wolf holds the boar, the young man seizes the opportunity, drawing his bow and firing an arrow that strikes the wild boar with precision, bringing it down. With the boar defeated, the young man praises the wolf, calling him "You are you" for their successful hunt. He then instructs You Are You to keep watch while he prepares to butcher the animal. He reflects on his 2 years living in the forest, explaining that if asked why he hasn't left, it's because he currently has a bounty on his head. The bounty is revealed to be a wanted poster from the Baltros kingdom, accusing him of treason and offering a very high reward for his capture. Having finished with the boar, the young man decides to leave the rest of the carcass for other monsters. He acknowledges that 2 years later, his wanted status remains, leaving him no choice but to continue his life in the forest. He and his white wolf companion walk through the forest, the young man suggesting they prepare a wild boar named Hot Pot once they returned home. The wolf responded with an eager bark. Soon, a pot simmered over a fire, its contents bubbling gently as the ingredients cooked. With the meal finished, he held a steaming bowl, a wide smile gracing his face, while the wolf eagerly devoured its own portion from a larger dish. As he savored the taste, he mused aloud about the convenience and deliciousness afforded by his cooking skill. He continued to eat, contemplating how he could make wild boar miso soup if only he possessed some miso. Suddenly, his expression shifted to one of surprise as he sensed something at the cave entrance. He realized that his cooking skill, while potent, could not simply conjure ingredients like miso. His aura sense skill activated, confirming the presence of a monster. He gripped his staff, ready for whatever approached, the wolf's paw visible and alert beside him. From the shadows of the cave entrance emerged a small, goblin-like creature, its arms laden with several round fruits. It uttered a soft, guttural sound. He stared, initially surprised by the creature's appearance. Then a smile spread across his face as he admitted it had truly caught him off guard. He recognized the fruits the goblin carried, identifying them as today's Rico fruit and Min fruit. As the creature made another distinctive sound, he watched as the goblin, holding a large bundle of meat, excitedly declared it was today's meat. He asked it to wait a moment. The goblin continued to chatter, offering the wild boar meat, while he wondered if it truly understood him. He then reflected that this encounter had happened about a year ago. He recalled the day he and Yu, the white wolf, were hunting for orc meat when they stumbled upon a goblin being attacked by a large orc. They intervened, defeating the orc to secure its meat, and in doing so, saved the goblin's life. The very next day, the same goblin appeared, carrying an offering of fruits. After that initial offering, he and Yu considered whether to accept the gifts. He eventually thanked the goblin, accepting its offering. With its offerings of fruits and wildflowers, the goblin would frequently appear before them, always bringing new gifts. He mused that the goblin didn't seem like a bad creature, noting that even Yu wasn't on guard around it. He felt a pang of guilt about always accepting things without giving anything in return. So he offered the goblin a piece of leftover meat, explaining that while it was only scraps, it was still a gift. The goblin's eyes widened with delight, and that was how they established a regular exchange, trading meat for the goblin's fruits. The goblin, overjoyed, bounced with its new bounty. He recalled the small goblin, saved from the orc, fleeing immediately after their encounter, leaving him to wonder about its nature. He pondered why he had not seen any other goblins nearby, and why this particular one only brought fruits and wildflowers as offerings. His thoughts continued, questioning if the goblin lived alone, perhaps separated from its companions, especially considering it was solitary when the orc attacked. He speculated that the goblin brought him fruits and vegetables so that it could receive the meat of monsters it was unable to hunt on its own. Later, as he rested, his wolf companion, Yu, stirred awake. He wondered if he had worried too much, then a realization dawned on him. The goblin was likely alone, just like him. The next day, he ventured out, bow in hand, and skillfully took aim, a swift arrow finding its mark. He celebrated his successful hunt, having caught a horned rabbit, anticipating a great meal for himself and Yu. The wolf watched him with keen eyes. Suddenly, the wolf let out a low growl, its posture tensing, startling him. He quickly asked Yu what was wrong. He immediately took a defensive stance, sensing the unseen danger that had caused his loyal companion to react so sharply, as the wolf stood protectively behind him. Beyond them, the vast wilderness stretched, a silent testament to the untamed world they inhabited, now holding an unknown threat. He returned to the cave, only to find it completely ransacked, its contents strewn about in disarray. The white wolf let out a low growl, its fangs bared, as he stared in shock, wondering aloud who could have caused such destruction. As he surveyed the damage, his gaze fell upon something unusual on the ground. He picked up a strange fruit, realizing it was new and had not been there before. He chastised himself for not having eaten all the previous day's fruit, which would have made the new arrival less surprising. A thought crossed his mind, questioning if the goblin might be responsible for the new fruit or the disarray. However, upon closer inspection of the marks and the extent of the damage, he concluded that the destruction was far too extensive, indicating it was done by something much larger than the small goblin. His hand brushed against a slimy substance, and he recoiled, seeing blood on his fingers. A chilling realization dawned on him. The goblin might be hurt. Just then, the white wolf barked, having caught the distinct scent of the monster responsible for the attack. With a determined expression, he prepared for the impending confrontation, activating his physical strengthening ability and initiating a flash step to move with incredible speed. He and the white wolf surged forward, a blur of motion, racing through the wilderness. They arrived at a clearing, the wolf stopping abruptly, and he questioned if this was the monster's lair. He and the white wolf stood before a colossal presence, the wolf barking fiercely at the unseen threat. The sheer scale of the creature's tracks and the disturbance in the forest left him wondering what kind of monster they had stumbled upon. Moments later, the full form of the beast was revealed, a gigantic, dark-furred bear with eyes that glowed with an eerie white light. Its immense size dwarfed both the protagonist and his companion, a truly terrifying sight. As the monstrous bear loomed, Eris appeared, her voice filled with urgency as she identified it as a blood bear, also known as the Scarlet Bear. She explained that it was a level 3 monster, a revelation that shocked him, as he had not known monsters possessed such a classification. She continued, emphasizing that a level 3 monster was incredibly difficult to defeat, especially for an adventurer who was not of mid or high rank. Eris warned him not to attack preemptively, or he would surely be killed. He could only stare in disbelief, realizing the direness of their situation as the blood bear let out a thunderous roar. The pursuit of the criminal who destroyed his home led him to a decisive battle against the formidable blood bear, a creature he had encountered before in the forest. The massive creature wasted no time, unleashing a powerful strike that tore through the very ground, sending debris flying with immense force. He watched the devastating impact, acknowledging the sheer power of the blow. He realized this was precisely the kind of powerful strike one would expect from a level 3 monster. He swiftly moved to counter, thrusting his staff forward with precision, aiming to strike the beast. Yet, the beast merely deflected the attack with a powerful swipe, its hide seemingly impervious to his weapon. He realized that normal weapons were proving useless against the blood bear, which let out another thunderous roar. He knew he could not afford to relax in this battle. He knew he had to give it his all, preparing to unleash a powerful fireball spell. With a surge of power, he unleashed a blazing spear, a concentrated burst of fire magic, directly at the roaring blood bear. The colossal bear roared once more, its powerful voice echoing through the forest as the magical attack struck. The blood bear, unfazed by the previous attack, let out a thunderous roar, lunging forward with terrifying speed. The protagonist narrowly dodged its massive claw, realizing with a grim expression that this formidable foe could not be defeated easily. He thought, "That's dangerous. Damn it, I can't defeat it easily, huh?" As the beast continued its assault, he braced himself, his hands pressing against the earth, preparing for his next move. With a powerful incantation, he unleashed an Earth Reaver spell, causing the very ground beneath the blood bear to erupt violently, sending debris flying. Yet, even as the earth shattered, he knew the blazing spear had proven insufficient. He began to channel an even greater amount of magical energy, preparing to cast Great Fireball, a spell he believed possessed the highest firepower. "Take this," he declared, launching the massive orb of concentrated flame directly at the monstrous bear. The Great Fireball detonated upon impact, engulfing the blood bear in a towering inferno. He watched, a slight smile on his face, but then realized the immense drain on his magical reserves, muttering that he had used too much mana. Nearby, the white wolf appeared, barking urgently. Despite the overwhelming flames, the blood bear emerged, seemingly unharmed, its glowing eyes fixed on him as it lunged once more, catching him completely by surprise. The beast struck him with brutal force, sending him flying backward. As he crashed to the ground, a sharp pain shot through him, and he realized with a gasp, there was another one. The blood bear stood over his prone form, letting out another deafening roar, its massive jaws agape. He lay there, groaning in pain, struggling to comprehend the relentless assault. Despite his injuries and the overwhelming power of his foe, he pushed himself up, his eyes burning with a renewed, fierce determination. Two white wolves clashed violently, their snarls echoing through the forest as one lunged at the other. Moments later, the protagonist witnessed the aftermath, seeing the majestic white wolf, his ally, yelp in pain as it collapsed, clearly injured. He cried out Eris's name, his face contorted with alarm and desperation. Eris, observing from afar with her ethereal wings, acknowledged his predicament, noting that he was indeed in a difficult situation. She cautioned him to be careful, explaining that even her abilities could not fully foresee his future. He then questioned how he was expected to fight, to which she replied that fusion magic, while powerful, consumed a vast amount of mana and was exceedingly dangerous if overused. With a confident smile, she affirmed that he would indeed fight, but by wielding a special sword. He repeated her words, a look of surprise and curiosity on his face as he pondered the mention of a special sword. Without hesitation, he rushed towards the injured white wolf, determined to protect his ally. As the wolf let out a pained whine, he quickly initiated an enhanced recovery spell, channeling healing energy into his companion. His hands glowed brightly as the recovery magic surged forth, enveloping the injured creature. He knew that to create the special sword, he needed to focus and accumulate his mana. Beside him, the white wolf let out a sharp bark. He then turned to the white wolf, "You," apologizing for the difficult task he was about to ask. He instructed You to run around and attract the blood bear's attention, promising to use that chance to finish the beast off. You responded with another bark, seemingly in agreement. As instructed, You moved with incredible speed, weaving around the blood bear. Even in its current condition, the white wolf proved agile enough to avoid the monstrous creature's attacks, drawing its enraged roars. Meanwhile, the young man closed his eyes, concentrating deeply, a bead of sweat forming on his brow as he gathered his magical energy. He envisioned the weapon, a special sword, a glacial sword that would be bigger and stronger than anything he had wielded before. With a sudden burst of power, the glacial sword materialized in his hands, a magnificent, shimmering blade of ice, radiating an intense cold. As the white wolf continued its valiant efforts to distract the blood bear, barking fiercely, the young man prepared his stance, his new weapon poised for attack. His eyes snapped open, now burning with fierce resolve and unwavering determination. He launched himself forward, executing a powerful whirlwind strike, the massive glacial sword carving a wide arc through the air towards the enraged blood bear. The assault continued relentlessly as he declared that it ends here, and followed up with a devastating helm splitter attack. The blood bear roared, either in pain or defiance, while the white wolf watched the unfolding battle with intense focus. He watched as the massive blood bear roared in fury, its dark fur bristling. Beside him, the white wolf let out a soft whimper, its body low to the ground. The protagonist realized the goblin's desperate intent. It sought to protect them. The small creature continued to hold on, letting out a strained cry. It clung with all its might, enduring the blood bear's continued roars and violent struggles to dislodge it. Seeing the goblin's valiant but increasingly desperate effort, he cried out for it to hold on, realizing they were. He watched in horror as the blood bear violently shook, finally dislodging the goblin, which was sent flying with a pained shriek. His face contorted in anguish and pure rage at the sight of the goblin's sacrifice. He screamed, denouncing the blood bear as a bastard, and charged forward, his glacial sword gleaming. He launched himself into the air, his body a blur of motion, bringing his glowing glacial sword down in a powerful, overhead strike towards the roaring beast. The glacial sword connected with the blood bear, unleashing a devastating impact that reverberated through the forest. Now on the ground, he looked back with a pained, grim expression, while the white wolf stood protectively beside him, barking fiercely. He felt a sudden, rough lick across his face, startling him from his battle focus. Still reeling from the unexpected gesture, he stood amidst the disturbed earth, his sword still clutched in his hand, his expression one of profound shock. As he processed the events, a quiet sound of understanding escaped him. A wave of gratitude washed over him, and he leaned into the large wolf, who responded with another affectionate lick. He quietly thanked the creature. He knelt beside the wolf, their shared gaze falling upon the small, still form of the goblin lying on the ground. His hand gently clasped the goblin's, a somber realization dawning on him as he murmured that the creature had been helping them. With a heavy heart and a dirt-streaked face, he looked down, the white wolf standing silently behind him. As he questioned if the goblin had also been protecting the cave, he carefully began to tend to the goblin's wounds, his hands moving with a gentle determination as the white wolf observed him. Having carefully wrapped the small creature in his cloak, he lifted it, carrying it gently. Another goblin, holding a piece of fruit, watched them with a curious, almost hopeful expression. Tears streamed down his face as he expressed his profound sorrow, blaming himself for the goblin's plight. Despite their different races, bonds were born out of their shared days in the forest, and now, with this heavy emotion, he walked away with the white wolf, still cradling the injured goblin. Deep within the forest, a young man tirelessly swung a massive sword, its weight a testament to his ambition. He vowed to himself that he would become strong enough to never again lose anything important. As he practiced a powerful rotation technique, a sharp pain shot through his hand, reminding him that he was still not strong enough to wield such a large blade without consequence. Suddenly, his companion, you, barked excitedly, having discovered something. The young man praised the white wolf, acknowledging its impressive find. He clenched his fist, reaffirming his resolve to eat much and build his strength. For 4 long years, Rido had made this forest his home, relentlessly pursuing his goal. Moments later, Rido rode swiftly upon Uru's back, the white wolf's powerful strides carrying them deeper into the dense woods. He leaned forward, his gaze sharp and focused, as Uru continued its rapid pace through the undergrowth. Suddenly, a monstrous wild boar, its tusks gleaming and eyes burning with aggression, burst from the trees, charging directly at them with a furious squeal. Without hesitation, Rido swiftly drew his massive sword, preparing to meet the charging beast head-on. He then launched himself from Uru's back, his silhouette momentarily framed against the sky as he brought his sword high above his head. With a fierce roar, Rido brought his blade down with devastating force, unleashing his helm splitter technique upon the approaching foe. Having just unleashed his powerful attack, Rido stood over the defeated wild boar, sword still in hand. He turned to Uru, instructing him to go ahead and eat half of the beast. Uru barked in agreement, and Rido observed that his companion had grown quite a bit. With a cheerful smile, he looked at Uru, suggesting they have a meat hot pot today, clearly pleased with their successful hunt. As he prepared the meat, Rido noticed a small, dark, crystalline object within the boar's remains. He picked it up, wondering aloud what it could be. Eris, having observed his discovery, explained that the object was called a magic stone. She clarified that a magic stone was a gemstone containing the magical energy of a certain element, and magicians used these stones to enhance their magical power. She continued, detailing that these magic stones could only be found in a few specific places, such as volcanoes for fire magic or lakes and oceans for water magic, and so on, depending on their elemental affinity. Rido acknowledged her explanation, finding it not entirely uncommon, but then questioned why such a stone would be found inside a wild boar. Eris responded with a cheerful exclamation, revealing that magic stones were the favorite food of most monsters, causing Rido to react with a shocked, at the idea of them eating such objects. She then clarified that it was more accurate to say monsters absorbed the stored magical power inside the stones, rather than eating them. Large-sized monsters, in particular, could use this absorption to enhance their abilities, much like magicians. Rido finally understood the concept. As he processed this new information, Eris approached him, announcing that she had good news and asking him to wait. With a radiant smile, Eris joyfully declared that the bounty on Rido's head was no longer active, exclaiming that he was finally free. She explained that since he had not been found for over 4 years, the kingdom had declared him dead, effectively lifting the bounty on his head. Rido's eyes widened in disbelief and excitement, asking if it was truly so. He then expressed a momentary concern about his lack of money, but a sudden realization dawned on him. They could finally go down to the village. She then suggested he visit the nearby village to sell the monster materials and wild herbs he had gathered. Furthermore, she advised him to make healing potions, acknowledging his skill in mixing ingredients. Rido listened intently, understanding her counsel. She reassured him, stating he could take Uru with him, She then casually added that if he put a collar on the white wolf, it would simply appear as a normal dog. Raito stared back, utterly dumbfounded by the suggestion. He quickly agreed, declaring they should prepare to go down to the village. A wave of relief washed over him, grateful that he wouldn't have to leave Uryu behind. He began the preparations, diligently cleaning Uryu's fur. Soon after, he carefully placed a collar around the majestic wolf's neck, a small smile gracing his lips. With his preparations complete, he stood at the mouth of his cave dwelling, a satchel slung over his shoulder, ready to embark on his journey. Before fully departing, he and Uryu paused at a simple grave marked by a wooden cross outside the cave, offering a moment of silent respect. Then, with a final glance, they turned and walked away, leaving the familiar sanctuary behind. With a cheerful declaration, he mounted Uryu's back, and the great white wolf surged forward, carrying him swiftly through the dense forest, a blur of motion. Moments later, they burst forth from the tree line, revealing a vast, open landscape of rolling hills and distant mountains. Raito gazed in awe, realizing they had truly left the forest behind. He rode atop Uryu, the white wolf, as they emerged from the dense forest. Eris said that there's a village around here, he mused. Let's go there first. Uryu responded with a soft woof. Moments later, his foot stepped onto the path leading into the village, confirming their arrival. As they ventured further, he observed the devastation. Eris was right, he stated grimly. The village is completely ravaged. This place was destroyed by a bunch of goblins. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, causing him to wince and cover his nose. Ugh, the smell of death is intense, he muttered, noticing the untouched corpses. Uryu let out a soft whine beside him. He decided to investigate one of the buildings, turning to Uryu. Uryu, he instructed, keep an eye out for me. Inside, he discovered a set of clothes that brought a wide smile to his face. Yes, he exclaimed, holding them up. It's the perfect size, and the design is the same as the clothes that I've been wearing. I guess it was a fashion trend. He reflected on his old attire, realizing the necessity of new garments. He had been using his sewing skill to fix the clothes he was wearing, but after 4 years, it was no wonder they were too small and worn out. Now that he could go out in public, new clothes were ideal. As he prepared to leave, he considered what else he might need. But I have to take some stuff with me, he thought, glancing at a broken mirror. I feel a little sorry, he added, perhaps for taking things from the ravaged home. Suddenly, a distant voice startled him. Someone's voice? He wondered, his eyes widening. He heard the voice exclaim, it's a magical beast. Outside, Uryu stood alert, letting out a low growl as 2 villagers approached. One, a man with spiky hair, pointed at Uryu, exclaiming, Hey Locke, there's a magical beast here. Looks like it's a white wolf. It's my first time seeing such a rare species. The villagers, having spotted the rare white wolf, began to discuss its value. One man, with a gruff voice, declared that the creature would bring good money, urging the others to kill it and strip its fur and skin. As the men spoke of violence, the white wolf, Uryu, let out a fierce snarl, her fangs bared in a clear warning. One of the villagers, startled, cried out for them to wait. The other villagers, witnessing the scene, exchanged bewildered glances. They recognized the white wolf as a magical beast, but the presence of a young man, seemingly a survivor from their ravaged village, left them utterly stunned. He gently stroked Uryu's head, who responded with a soft whimper, as if acknowledging his comfort. Raito murmured to her, apologizing for the frightening encounter. The villagers continued to stare, their expressions a mixture of shock and confusion, unable to comprehend the sight before them. One of the women, breaking the silence, questioned if he had truly tamed the beast, her voice laced with disbelief. The bald man echoed her sentiment, wondering if such a feat was even possible. As the villager spoke, his gaze fell upon a small, glowing emblem on his belt, the adventurer's badge Eris had mentioned. A realization dawned on him about its significance. He then turned to Uryu, suggesting they leave before they attracted more trouble. Uryu barked in agreement, but one of the villagers, the spiky-haired man, called out, urging them to wait a second. The villager then directly asked if he was from their village. Raito, placing a hand on Uryu, calmly replied that he was not, merely passing by. He found himself questioned by the villagers, who asked if the white wolf was his contract beast. Eris, stepping forward, offered to explain the concept, while he, still processing the term, looked on with a puzzled expression. Eris continued her explanation, clarifying that a contract beast is a creature tamed by a contract magician using a specific spell. She then added that, as a support magician, he would not be able to learn such contract spells. Despite Eris's explanation, the villagers remained skeptical. One of them, a woman, questioned the wolf's nature, while another, a bald man, insisted it was impossible for a non-contracted beast to be so friendly with a human. He, however, simply stated that the wolf was his family. The wolf, sensing the villagers' hostility, reacted aggressively, letting out a fierce growl. He quickly intervened, placing a hand on its head and gently telling it to relax, calming the agitated beast. As the tension momentarily subsided, he attempted to depart, declaring that their business was concluded. However, the bald villager, Locke, quickly interjected, demanding confirmation that he was not in a contract with the wolf, effectively halting his exit. He firmly reiterated his stance, looking directly at the villagers and declaring once more, with conviction, that the wolf was his family. The villagers exchanged knowing glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to a more sinister, calculating demeanor, a collective smirk spreading across their faces. Their smiles quickly turned into menacing grins as they drew their weapons, surrounding him and the white wolf. Locke declared that if the wolf was not a contract beast, then they had no problem taking it away from him. Locke stepped forward, his face contorted in a snarl, and demanded that he hand over the wolf, emphasizing the rarity and value of white wolf materials. He stood firm, his expression resolute. Another villager, observing his worn-out bow and arrow, added to the taunts, mocking him as a broke guy who couldn't even afford proper weapons, further escalating the confrontation. The villagers, led by Locke, pressed Raito, demanding he hand over the white wolf quietly, promising to spare his life. Another villager, observing Raito's seemingly frail appearance, scoffed, remarking on his weakness. He, however, seemed unfazed by their threats. He turned his attention to the white wolf, Eris, who let out a soft whimper. Raito pondered aloud if he could defeat these adventurers, finding the situation an interesting development. Meanwhile, Eris, in her human form, clarified that the men were not true adventurers, but merely a family of bandits masquerading as such. She further explained that they had simply stolen their adventurer badges. Raito, surprised by the revelation of them being bandits, questioned the validity of their badges. Eris assured him that he would have no trouble defeating them in his current state. Back with the villagers, Locke, unaware of Raito's conversation, continued to press his advantage, revealing that there was a bounty on the father's head and that capturing him for the royal army would yield a reward. Raito, hearing the mention of a reward, seemed to consider the implications, his expression thoughtful. Locke, misinterpreting Raito's pause, smirked, believing the young man had given up. The other villager also looked on, curious. But Raito had not given up. Instead, he extended his hands forward, palms open, preparing for a spell. Locke and the other villager reacted with confusion and derision as Raito declared his intent to cast Fireball. They mocked him, calling it lousy beginner magic. Their mockery quickly turned to shock as Raito unleashed not one, but dozens of dark, swirling fireballs, surrounding him in a menacing display of power. He stood amidst the inferno, his eyes glowing, a silent challenge to their disbelief. He unleashed a devastating barrage of dark fireballs, engulfing the bandit villagers in explosions and screams of pain. Moments later, the battle was over. He stood calmly beside his majestic white wolf, amidst the unconscious forms of the defeated bandits, smoke still lingering in the air. He remarked that one of the bandits was surprisingly tough, to which the defeated man, struggling to rise, questioned if that overwhelming power was truly considered beginner magic. Another bandit, enraged by the swift defeat of his comrades, charged forward with a furious roar, refusing to believe what he was witnessing. His desperate charge was met with swift, brutal force as the white wolf stomped him into the ground, rendering him unconscious. The white wolf stood triumphantly over the fallen bandit, and he affectionately praised his loyal companion, calling him "You are you." He surveyed the scene, noting that the bandits had not been much of a challenge, but then pondered the practical problem of how he would carry the unconscious bodies. She considered the implications, realizing that if smoke was present, there might still be some villagers who had survived. With a determined expression, she spurred her armored horse forward, commanding her retinue to follow. A group of villagers recoiled in terror, their faces contorted in fear as an unseen force caused them to stumble and fall. Meanwhile, the young man, Kai, and his companion, "You are you," had managed to secure a carriage. He mused aloud that it looked quite heavy, asking "You are you" if he could handle it, to which the wolf responded with an affirmative bark. Kai expressed relief at finding the carriage, noting that they could now transport the tied-up individuals all the way to the city. As they continued their journey, Kai glanced back, a sense of unease settling upon him, as if sensing an impending disturbance. His apprehension proved justified as a thundering sound heralded the approach of a formidable cavalry unit, led by a stern figure on horseback. The ground trembled as the armored riders surrounded them, their horses' hooves kicking up dust. Kai, caught completely off guard, could only utter a bewildered, "What the hell?" What? Before he could fully comprehend the situation, a commanding voice boomed from the approaching cavalry, ordering them to freeze. The leader of the cavalry, a stern woman with long dark hair, dismounted and pointed her sword directly at Kai, demanding to know his purpose there and why the men were tied up. Stunned by the sudden confrontation and the general's aggressive questioning, Kai and "You are you" could only stare back in bewildered silence. He found himself facing the general, her expression stern and demanding, as she pressed him for immediate answers. She warned that depending on his response, they might have no choice but to place him under arrest. He stammered, caught off guard by the intensity of her interrogation. Beside him, a young woman named Eris interjected, attempting to mediate the tense situation. Eris then explained that the general and her accompanying soldiers were the Knights of Valkyria, a prestigious order from the kingdom of Baltros. She further revealed that the woman in front of him was the first princess of the kingdom, the eldest of the previous king's 3 daughters, making her Kai's cousin. Eris continued, stating that while her formal name was Now, people commonly referred to her as the Princess General. The revelation struck him with profound shock, causing him to exclaim in disbelief at the familial connection. He pondered the unexpected turn of events, realizing he had heard rumors of his cousin shortly after his reincarnation, but never imagined he would encounter her in such a desolate place. Eris, observing his confusion, reminded him that the village had been attacked by goblins previously. She explained that barrier stones and decay rocks, designed to repel demons, had been placed there, making the presence of monsters highly unusual. He acknowledged her point, recognizing the strangeness of the situation. The Princess General, Now, listened intently as Eris explained that the Knights of Valkyria had come to investigate the matter, especially since the royal capital was not far from the village. The memory of the goblin attack, with its bloody aftermath, underscored the gravity of their mission. He considered the general's earlier question about his presence, realizing he needed a plausible explanation. He admitted to himself that the situation was indeed strange, and he was unsure how to proceed. Eris, ever practical, advised him to be honest about having caught some bandits. However, she quickly added that he should pretend to be a villager who had been left behind. He readily agreed, finding the idea of pretending to be a villager acceptable. He then asked if he could at least tell them his real name, noting that he had been a wanted man until recently, implying a past that might complicate a full disclosure. He listened as Eris explained that his wanted poster never mentioned his name, only a sketch of him as a child and the charges he faced. He understood, as she further clarified that not even the previous king's daughters were informed of his existence, his birth as a royal being a well-guarded secret. Eris then reassured him, stating that since there were no surviving villagers to invalidate his alibi, the knights would not know he was lying. She advised him to call on her again if he encountered any more problems. Moments later, facing the general, he introduced himself as Rido, claiming to be from this village. The general, now, acknowledged his name, Rido, and pressed him for details. He explained that a pack of goblins had attacked the village a few days prior, and he had somehow managed to escape, but she then asked if he was the only villager left alive. He replied that he had nowhere else to go, which was why he had returned to the village. Now then inquired about the 3 individuals tied up nearby. He quickly identified them as bandits, explaining that they had been attempting to steal from the village, and he had been forced to stop them. Now regarded him with a thoughtful, almost suspicious expression, her fingers resting on her chin. Suddenly, a knight approached, calling out to her as Your Highness. Her gaze then shifted, landing on the large white wolf beside him. She questioned his claim of being a villager, asking about the presence of the wolf. He immediately embraced the wolf, affectionately explaining that Yu was his family, whom he had cared for since it was a small cub, and assured her that the wolf would never attack anyone. He affectionately stroked Yu's fur, a wide smile on his face, while General Now observed the large wolf, noting its impressive size. Still, her gaze remained fixed on him, a hint of suspicion lingering in her eyes. He explained that Yu had been protecting him, and that he had been wandering through the grasslands. She then inquired if he had encountered any monsters during his travels. Her suspicion intensified as she pressed him, questioning how such a formidable wolf could not handle a mere pack of goblins, and if he had truly abandoned the villagers to flee alone. He recoiled, visibly startled by her direct accusation. As he stammered for a response, Eris subtly appeared beside him, holding a small cue card that explicitly instructed him, as Rido, to explain the situation exactly as they had planned. Taking a moment to compose himself, he continued, explaining that Yu had been a small cub when he first kept him in the village, but as the wolf grew larger, some villagers became frightened, forcing him to keep Yu in a nearby cave. He then added that there was indeed a small cave near the village. General Now considered his revised story, finding it plausible enough to warrant investigation. Meanwhile, one of her knights confirmed her thoughts, stating that a cave did exist in the nearby forest. Turning her attention back to him, she inquired about the mayor's name, testing his knowledge of the village. He quickly responded that the mayor's name was Ro. She then pressed further, demanding he also provide the name of the village chief. She continued her interrogation, adding another crucial question. How had he managed to capture the 3 individuals tied up nearby, and had he used his wolf to do so? He offered a nervous, sheepish smile, admitting that he was merely a support magician. General Now's eyes widened in surprise and renewed suspicion at this unexpected revelation. He had just declared himself a support magician, a claim that ignited General Now's fury. Her face contorted in anger as she accused him of thinking her stupid, vehemently questioning his assertion. Her anger escalating, she pointed a finger at him, demanding to know how he had captured the bandits. She suspected he had used the large white wolf instead of magic, warning him that she might have misheard and would ask one more time. Kai, internally flustered, could only think that she had gotten suddenly so mad. She continued her interrogation, asserting that a support magician could not possibly handle any attack magic, unless he intended to reveal a second, different type of mage job. He quickly denied such a ridiculous notion. Still fuming, she dismissed both support and attack magic as crummy jobs, telling him not to play dumb. As the general's skepticism persisted, Kai found himself surrounded by her knights, with Yu calmly at his side, while Now continued to glare at him. He realized he had completely forgotten about the deep-seated prejudice against certain professions in this world, acknowledging that people often overreacted to what they considered unfortunate jobs. He tried to explain that while he might not be able to learn blast magic, even a support magician could use beginner-level magic. Now, however, questioned the practical use of such everyday magic. He then offered to prove his abilities, asking if she would finally believe him. Now agreed, instructing him to try his magic on a nearby barrel and to avoid anything too fancy or suspicious. Eris, observing from a distance, subtly suggested that about 10 fireballs should be enough to convince them. With a focused expression, he extended his hands and chanted, summoning multiple small, dark fireballs that floated around him. As he prepared to unleash his magic, Now watched, seemingly unimpressed, while the surrounding knights gasped in astonishment at the sheer number of fireballs he had conjured at once. He continued his powerful display, the dark magical energy erupting violently, causing General Now to recoil slightly, her eyes wide with surprise. Her initial shock quickly turned to frustration as she acknowledged the undeniable truth of his power. She muttered that it seemed he was indeed telling the truth, even as her knights around her expressed their astonishment, questioning if such a display could truly be beginner magic, while others simply exclaimed their amazement. He looked down, a hint of embarrassment on his face, as General now composed, addressed him directly. She admitted that his demonstrated magic was certainly sufficient to deal with bandits of the level they were pursuing and apologized for her earlier doubts, adding that she would believe him as long as he believed in himself. She then revealed the true purpose of her visit, explaining that she needed to ask him for a favor, to assist them in their investigation. She added that she believed he was now from this village, and mentioned her cousin, who seemed to have had many options. He looked up, his expression one of surprise, as he repeated her request, assist. The young man, Kai, stood before the general, offering his assistance with the investigation. She instructed him to recount precisely what had transpired in the village, to which he readily agreed, though he expressed doubt about his ability to provide substantial help. Eris then interjected, declaring it was her turn to speak, and urging Kai to listen carefully and respond accordingly. Her words initiated a shift in focus, revealing that a pack of goblins had attacked the village a few days prior. These goblins, however, were unlike any ordinary pack. They had breached the village defenses only after systematically destroying the decay rocks and barrier stones that had been strategically placed around the settlement before their assault. The decay rock, known for emitting a stench that monsters despise, and the barrier stone, which creates a protective shield against physical attacks, were both vital tools for repelling monstrous threats. Yet, despite their utility, these magical stones possessed inherent weaknesses. Decay rocks could be approached by monsters if they found a way to block the noxious odor, and barrier stones required direct activation by a guard to maintain their protective field. The goblins that had invaded this particular village had behaved with an unsettling precision, as if they possessed intimate knowledge of these very weaknesses. To prevent the village guards from activating the barrier stones, the goblins had first targeted them with bows and arrows, then stormed directly into the village. Kai concluded his account, emphasizing that the goblins were armed like humans and operated with the coordination of a well-organized army. The general found this difficult to believe, questioning how goblins could display such intelligent behavior, especially in neutralizing the spell stones. He then added that despite his fierce fight, he ultimately failed to save anyone, and it was Yu who had rescued him. The general, her expression serious, continued to analyze the situation, noting that goblins typically did not consume human flesh. She reasoned that if more intelligent monsters had been present, the corpses would have been completely devoured, leaving distinct marks. She then pressed for more details, asking if there had been any dead villagers. She paused, her gaze distant, before acknowledging the grim reality of the situation. Turning her attention back to Kai, the general inquired if the goblins possessed any other peculiar characteristics, urging him to share anything that came to mind. He, however, admitted he hadn't actually seen them himself. As he struggled to recall any further details, scratching his head in thought, Eris quickly interjected, instructing him, by his alias Rido, to explain what he knew. The general then considered the possibility of goblin knights, a thought prompted by the revelation that some of the goblins were as large as orcs. Eris clarified that goblin knights were a higher species, an evolved version of normal goblins, which surprised Kai. The general concurred, stating that this explanation would certainly account for the goblins' unusual behavior. With a clearer understanding of the attack, the general then asked Kai about his immediate plans. She generously offered him shelter if he had nowhere else to go, but he quickly declined her offer. He explained his intention to move to another town with his loyal wolf, Yu, who affectionately nuzzled him. Yu, he stated, was the only family he had left. Kai then realized the impracticality of accompanying the general to the royal capital with Yu. The general, understanding his predicament, apologized for having brought up the idea. The general then complimented Kai on the impressive magic he had displayed earlier and suggested he consider becoming an adventurer. He looked at her, surprised by the proposition. He listened as one of the knights expressed concern to the general, stating that the adventurer profession was a difficult one to survive in, especially with the capabilities of his current, seemingly unimpressive skills. He looked on with wide, curious eyes, repeating the phrase, an adventurer, huh? The knight, meanwhile, emphasized that his survival would be entirely up to him. Moments later, the general extended her hand, offering him a formal document and a small, tied pouch, instructing him to take them. She further explained that these items served as his reward for bounty hunting and as proof of his identity, which would prove invaluable when he eventually moved to another town. He, alongside a happily barking Yu, accepted the gifts with a look of surprise and profound gratitude, thanking her profusely. As the general's knight confirmed that the village investigation was complete and they should return to the royal capital, she turned to Kai, informing him that they would escort him to the nearest town. The general then ordered someone to place him on a horse, but he quickly interjected, assuring her it was unnecessary as he could simply ride on his wolf, Yu. She acknowledged his preference, now mounted on her own horse, as the entire group appeared ready for departure. He, indeed, was already settled comfortably on Yu's back, who let out a soft bark. With the preparations complete, the general, her expression resolute, gave the command to move out, and the company began their journey across the open landscape. As they traveled, he observed the general's squad more closely, realizing that not only were they all remarkably young, but the entire escort appeared to be composed solely of women. He found himself approached by one of the general's squad members, a young woman with distinct animal ears and a tail. She greeted him with a cheerful "Wan," and politely asked if she could speak with him for a moment. while he internally noted her unique features, realizing she must be a beast man. She immediately questioned him about the absence of men in their division, then quickly answered her own query, explaining with a playful wink that it was because the princess general disliked men. He reacted with surprise to this revelation. Despite her explanation, he confessed to the general that he had not gotten that impression from her at all. The general listened silently, her expression unreadable. The general then clarified, stating that it was the first time she had ever treated a man so kindly. She further explained that she was a woman who favored the strong and talented, regardless of gender. He looked at her, surprised by her candidness. The Beastman squad member interjected, suggesting that perhaps the general had seen some potential in him, especially after witnessing his amazing magic. She expressed a desire to learn magic herself. He pondered if that was truly the case. He then shifted the topic, acknowledging her explanation about the lack of men, but inquired why the entire group consisted only of young people. You, his wolf companion, remained attentive beside him. The general responded, explaining that many in their order could use magic as weapons, and magic was most powerful during the teenage years and 20s. This, she concluded, was why their group comprised only younger individuals. The Beastman squad member then added that she herself could not use magic, but had been confident in her swordsmanship, which was how she had been accepted into the order as a knight. As the conversation continued, a sudden, deep rumbling sound erupted, shaking the ground. The squad members cried out, identifying the source as a monster. He looked around, startled, demanding to know what was happening amidst the growing noise. The ground beneath them tore open, and a colossal, segmented monster, resembling a massive worm, burst forth from the earth. The general and her squad, including the Beastman and the braided hair member, immediately turned their attention to the emerging threat. The massive, segmented worm-like creature, identified as a sandworm, continued to emerge from the ground, emitting a low, guttural sound. As it fully revealed itself, Kai stared in shock, exclaiming his surprise at the sight of the giant worm. From nearby, Eris's voice called out, acknowledging the creature. She then clarified that the monster was called a sandworm and, despite its intimidating appearance, was fundamentally harmless to humans. Kai expressed relief at this information. Eris continued, explaining that sandworms would not attack unless provoked and, furthermore, were beneficial creatures that helped the soil flourish, making them beloved by farmers. A farmer was seen tending to his field with a sandworm nearby. However, she added a crucial warning. While they were somewhat unpleasant to look at, leading many women to dislike them, one should never kill a sandworm. If a sandworm's corpse was not handled carefully, it would release pheromones that would attract many more of its kind. Kai, still processing Eris's disturbing revelation, watched in disbelief as General now commanded her squad to take attack positions. The squad members, including the Beastman and braided hair knights, swiftly prepared for combat, ignoring Eris's warning. Realizing the imminent danger, Kai, with you by his side, understood that this was a dire situation. He knew he had to stop them from fighting the creature. He urgently called out to Princess Now, pleading with her not to harm the monster, and explaining that killing it would only attract more. His sudden intervention caused the general to turn, her expression a mix of surprise and irritation at being interrupted. Before Kai could elaborate further, she swiftly struck him down with a powerful, unseen blow, sending him sprawling to the ground. Still reeling from the general's swift action, he watched as she herself began to unravel, her eyes wide with terror. She stammered, trying to reassure herself that a royal knight would never lose her composure, but her fear was palpable. His squad members, observing her distress, began to explain her condition. One young woman with animal ears noted that the princess suffered from insectophobia, while another urged her not to push herself. She continued, elaborating that the princess had been severely injured by a bug-like monster as a child, and ever since, had been too terrified to fight such creatures. Despite her terror, General Now attempted to regain her composure, declaring with a shaky voice that she would fight the sandworm down alone. Her squad members, however, expressed deep concern for her well-being. Her resolve crumbling, she cowered, eyes squeezed shut, as the massive sandworm loomed over her, its segmented body undulating gently. Her squad members cried out, urging her to hold on, while he watched, utterly shocked by the extent of her paralyzing fear. He lunged forward, shouting for them to wait, desperately reminding them that killing even one sandworm would only attract many more.